Chapter 1478. In the stone hut, Yu Danxiang stretched and then put down the file in his hand. The file was given to him by Master Musashi. It had only one purpose, and that was to smooth out the horns he broke off from some original demons of the void. Master Musashi usually liked to use the horns of the original demons of the void to carve some trinkets, and each time he would carve the appearance of the same girl. He said that the girl was his cousin, but in the end, she married one of his good brothers. In any case, Yu Danxiang's task was to smooth out the horns of the original demons of the void that he usually hunted down and turn them into neat raw materials. Yu Danxiang had always been very conscientious in completing this task. This was one of the ways he could gain Master Musashi's favor, just like how he could gain benefits from King of Han by lowering his head to curry favor and even giving up his dignity. There was nothing different about it. Although handling these horns of the original demons of the void was obviously much more comfortable, there was essentially nothing different about it. The things that both parties could gain from King of Han were far better than the occasional guidance or two from Master Musashi. For example, the fruit that he had just eaten that had been thrown to the ground by King of Han and cracked under his feet. Yu Danxiang had actually eaten this fruit several times before, and every time he ate it, his body would be strengthened to a certain extent. This was much more effective than some of the training methods that Master Musashi had taught him. Because he had just eaten that fruit, Yu Danxiang's injuries were actually healing rapidly. Now, most of the wounds on his body had already healed, and the pain had also decreased to an acceptable level. Of course, Yu Danxiang didn't give up on the training methods that Master Musashi had taught him. Just like earning money, earning $1 was still earning a few $100s in one go was also earning. The fruit was a one-time thing, but the training was long-term, and they would eventually be even. At this moment, Yu Danxiang heard some commotion coming from outside the stone hut, and then the curtain made from the skin of the original demons was suddenly lifted open. Yu Danxiang subconsciously turned his head and said, "Master Musashi, you're here. The thing you want is mine. Lord Attila." The person who walked into the stone hut wasn't Musashi, but King of Han, Attila, who had left without a word. Attila was expressionless as he walked straight in. Yu Danxiang trembled and hurriedly stood up, but when he faced with King of Han's approach, his legs couldn't help but tremble, and he subconsciously took a few steps back. "Why, dog slave, after seeing this king, aren't you very happy?" King of Han sneered. "Don't you want this king's reward?" I'm not." Yu Danxiang composed himself, and then revealed a fawning smile. "I was too happy to see you, so I spoke incoherently. King Attila, may I know why you're looking for me? Do you want wine? But I really don't have any wine here. You've already taken all the wine I stole from heaven." Smack! The sound of a whip striking. Yu Danxiang directly fell to the ground, and the wound that had just healed opened again. King of Han said coldly, "What did you say? You actually said this king took your things?" No, it's me. It's the things I contributed to the king." Yu Danxiang endured the pain, got up, and smiled apologetically. "I'm useless. If I knew that the king would like it, I would have stolen more from you last time. I'm useless." Smack, 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 smack. "Dog slave, trash, 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 trash. Ha ha ha. Shout, continue shouting. This king is happy, so I'll continue to reward you, trash." King of Han's cruel laughter could be heard as he whipped Yu Danxiang wildly. "I'm a dog slave. I'm trash. Ha ha, I'm trash." Yu Danxiang was crying and laughing at the same time, as if he had gone crazy. "I'm really trash. King, you're right. You're absolutely right. Ha ha ha." King of Han kept whipping Yu Danxiang for a while, and then took back the long whip. He seemed to be satisfied, and suddenly shouted coldly, "Slave, stand up." Yu Danxiang didn't have the strength to speak at this time. It took him a lot of time to stand up, and now he looked like a person stained with blood. King, are you comfortable now? This time the reward, what a greedy guy." King of Han suddenly smiled. "Are you thinking that when you become stronger, you'll repay all the humiliation you suffered from me?" I don't dare. How can I be stronger than you, king?" Yu Danxiang trembled all over. King of Han Attila sneered. "It doesn't matter if you admit it or not. Do you think that with the rewards I gave you, you'll be stronger than me? Do you think I'll be so stupid to make you stronger than myself? I don't dare. Yu Danxiang lowered his head dejectedly. How could he not know? He just didn't want to think like this. Trash. King of Hun Attila laughed, and then turned over his hand. For you, slave. Yu Danxiang subconsciously raised his head and saw that King of Hun Attila's hand was holding an extremely disgusting thing. It looked like some kind of organ, and it was still alive and beating. He couldn't help but ask in horror, King, what is this? The brain of a primogenitor demon. King of Hun Attila sneered. Why? Don't you want to become stronger? This thing is a good toy. Eat it. Okay. I'll eat it later. Yu Danxiang's face immediately turned pale, but he didn't dare to disobey King of Han Attila's order, so he could only compromise and say, I'm not hungry now, King. King, that's not up to you. King of Hun Attila snorted coldly, and the long whip in his hand suddenly extended, directly coiling Yu Danxiang in front of him. Then, like a palm, he directly stuffed the primogenitor demon's brain into Yu Danxiang's mouth. He struggled with all his might, but how could he be a match for a transcendent being like King of Hun? The bitter and nauseating thing was directly stuffed into his throat, and he had no choice but to swallow it. At this moment, his body felt as if it was being burned by a raging fire, and Yu Danxiang let out a shrill scream. The long whip loosened, and Yu Danxiang directly collapsed on the ground, his body convulsing crazily. King of Han Attila sneered. I heard that you only came here because you were lucky enough to pick up Master Dong's token. Do you really think you're the main character of your life? But I'm merciful, and I like to help weak guys like you the most. Now enjoy it well. You'll love the feeling of becoming strong. After saying this, King of Hun Attila didn't look at Yu Danxiang anymore. He directly lifted the curtain, left the square outside the Eternal Night Palace, and disappeared from sight. Yu Danxiang Attila was still in the stone hut, still howling in pain. Here, no one responded to him, and no one knew him. King Hun knew. From the depths of his throat, he squeezed out a beast-like voice. His eyes were scarlet, like a beast's. King of Han, did you hear anything, Master Musashi? Taisetsu Attila suddenly turned his head at this moment, looking somewhat puzzled behind him. It seemed like something was calling him, but it was faint, or perhaps it was an illusion. Sound? What kind of sound is it? Master Musashi Attila followed Taisetsu Attila's gaze and frowned. Maybe one of our companions went out. This is the door that connects the entire Paradise Lost, so it's normal to have some movements. Go in quickly. Don't let Fushi Throne wait for too long. Taisetsu Attila nodded, then took a deep breath and directly walked into the light door. At this moment, what he didn't notice was that Musashi Attila was carefully sizing up the moment Taisetsu Attila walked into the light door. Although most of the people in the Transcendence organization had strange characters, they weren't really stupid. The reason why Musashi Attila talked so much about the internal affairs of the organization without knowing anything about Taisetsu Attila was because he felt that there were very few experts who would reject the benefits of the Transcendence organization for the first time, and also because of the existence of this light door. The light door was jointly created by the throne. Apart from being extremely sturdy, it also had the function of identifying spies. If one's strength hadn't reached the limit of breaking through the subworld, or if one wasn't a human, one wouldn't be able to enter the space of thrones through the light door. As for those who met the requirements but had bad intentions, wouldn't they still have to meet the throne once? If it was someone with bad intentions, the throne would naturally be able to see through it. At this moment, after Taisetsu Attila stepped out, he smoothly walked into the light door. The light door didn't move at all throughout the entire process. After Taisetsu Attila's figure finally disappeared, Musashi Attila stretched his body and sat down cross-legged. He took out a small knife from his waist and rummaged through his bag, but he couldn't find what he wanted. He originally wanted to take something from Yu Danxiang, but after meeting Taisetsu, he forgot about it. Musashi Attila shook his head and could only put away the small knife and lean on the pillar next to him. At the very least, before Taisetsu Attila appeared again. He couldn't leave this place. Since he had nothing to do, Master Musashi Attila used a small knife to cut off a small piece of wood from the pillar and carve something on it. Musashi Attila said with a smile, "The things that Attila gave me are not bad. Yu Danxiang Attila's foundation is good enough, so he can learn new things." This middle-aged uncle, who was inexplicably caught in a crack and was completely useless, had no talent at all. However, his heart that wanted to become stronger was the same as it was in the past. In the past, he was also regarded as a guy with no talent. Work hard, and one day, you will. After passing through the light door, Taisetsu Attila felt that he was floating. It was more like he was sent to some place or something. After landing, Taisetsu Attila looked around vigilantly. The moment he passed through the light door, he even had a feeling that he was being seen inside and out. However, this feeling disappeared in an instant, and he couldn't even find out where this feeling of being spied on came from. Based on the current situation, this Transcendence organization didn't seem to be as bad as Miss Maid said. In front of him was a desolate land, as if he had arrived at a mountain tomb. In front of him, at the bottom of a cliff, he could faintly see the entrance of a cave. Taisetsu approached and saw the words Fire Cloud Cave above the cave entrance. He couldn't help but feel curious. The words were written in an ancient script that he hadn't studied at all. But when they entered his eyes, they naturally became modern characters that he could understand. Taisetsu clicked his tongue in wonder. Suddenly, he heard a rather serious voice coming from inside. "Since you're here, why are you hesitating?" "Oh wait, I'm coming in," Taisetsu replied directly. Suddenly, the air became quiet. Inside the Fire Cloud Cave, after a long while, a soften was heard. However, the tone of the person who had spoken made it sound as if he had been caught off guard. Taisetsu didn't care much. He shrugged his shoulders, put the scarf on his chest on his shoulder, and strode into the Fire Cloud Cave. Just like the martial arts dramas that Des used to watch in prison out of boredom, there was really a different world in this kind of place. Although it couldn't be said that how amazing it was, there was a small bridge with flowing water, a simple wooden house, a flower field full of peonies, and an octagonal pavilion outside the house. At this time, a young man with long hair that reached the ground, who looked like he was less than 20 years old, was sitting in the octagonal pavilion. His hands were fiddling with an exquisite 8 trigrams plate on the raw stone table. This 8 trigrams plate could be rotated. When it was rotated, it could even make the sounds. Taisetsu looked around and found that there was no one else here except for the long-haired man in the ancient costume. He thought that this guy was probably the Fushi throne that Musashi had mentioned. So, he quickly walked to the octagonal pavilion. Along the way, Taisetsu finally said, "Hello." The long-haired man who was playing with the 8 trigrams plate stopped. Only a click was heard at this time, and the 8 trigrams plate also stopped. The long-haired man suddenly frowned. "What's wrong?" Taisetsu asked curiously. "Is this thing broken?" The long-haired man finally raised his head. After looking at Taisetsu, he rolled his eyes slightly and said angrily, "This is a special tool that I asked Team Lu to make. How can it be broken so easily?" "Oh," Taisetsu nodded. In fact, he didn't understand this. "Wait, this guy seemed to roll his eyes at me just now?" The long-haired man shook his head at this time, put away the 8 trigrams plate in his hand, then stood up and suddenly said, "The content of the foreign body is so high. The highest level of transformation. Why can't the anthropomorphization reach the limit? Why did I let you in just like that? Oh, maybe my talent is not good, so I'm always stuck at this level." What did you just say?" Taisetsu suddenly opened his mouth wide. Unexpectedly, the long-haired man also opened his mouth slightly at this time and said with a stunned face, "Didn't the owner ask you to come and urge me to go back?" "Taisetsu, what did I come here to do in the first place? Damn it." Chapter 1479. In the octagonal pavilion of the Fire Cloud Cave, the young man with long hair and Taisetsu sat facing each other. In other words, Taisetsu widened his eyes in surprise. There was no tearful process of recognizing each other. Whether it was the young man or Taisetsu, it was the first time they met each other. The only connection between them was black soul. To be precise, the young man with long hair was an old black soul that even he himself couldn't remember how old he was. He was Fushi, and the black soul in the shop was number 9 at the beginning. Why is your number 9 at the beginning? Is it a handsome guy with an extra prefix compared to other black soul numbers? Taisetsu was quite silent at this time. In fact, he himself also had a number. Whether it was him, Tianzi, Zhao Lu, or Chun Mingming, they all had numbers. However, Des had always felt that this number was very casual, willful. According to Miss Maid's words, he was asked to pick one from 1 to 99. If it was not used, then he would use it directly, and so on. Therefore, Taisetsu really felt that this number was really useless. It didn't need to be ranked by order or performance. It seemed to have some connection with one's strength, but it was not big. Therefore, he could choose from 1 to 99. Later, Taisetsu casually chose 88. In fact, it was nothing. It was just that the Chinese felt that 88 was more auspicious. Therefore, Taisetsu could actually be called Black Soul number 88. By the way, Taiyanzi's number was 1001, named by Miss Maid. Don't you know? Number 9 of the beginning blinked at this time and said, those who can develop the black soul body to the limit of anthropomorphization will automatically be promoted to the beginning level. I'm the 9th to do it, so according to the order, I'm number 9 of the beginning. As for those below the beginning level, you can choose whatever number you want. Judging from the density of your foreign body, this is something that will happen sooner or later. Don't you want to inquire about it? Who can I inquire about it? Taisetsu shook his head and suddenly became a little curious. He couldn't help but ask, by the way, what's Yu Ye's number? As the chief manager of the Black Soul Envoys, Miss Maid, although there was no such position in the shop, she was obviously doing this. Taisetsu still didn't have a clear idea of how terrifying Miss Maid's power was, but she should be at the beginning level, right? Yu Yi, number 9 of the beginning, was puzzled at this time. Who is this person? From the looks of it, he is also an onyx soul. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't been back for a long time, so I don't know much about new onyx souls. Taisetsu couldn't help being startled. Fushi of the 9th beginning was also taken aback. Wait, Taisetsu rubbed his forehead at this time and then asked tentatively, Senior, may I ask, how long have you not been back? Fushi thought for a while and said, it's hard to say because there is no concept of time in the crevice. In other words, the time here is chaotic. We can also enter various subworlds of different time periods that we'll hear. So if you ask me how long I haven't been back, I can only tell you that it's been a while. Well, to be specific, I haven't been back since the super strong people in the dimensional crevice attacked the shop. Well, to be exact, it should be since the new generation in the dimensional crevice. Because Taisetsu didn't have any concept of this, he dragged the time out, even before Miss Maid started working in the shop. So he thought for a while and said, according to the time, Miss Yi became a maid more than 300 years ago in my original world. She was mainly responsible for taking care of the master's daily life and managing the Black Soul Envoys. Unexpectedly, Fushi frowned again at this time. Now the master's maid is called Yu Yi? More than 300 years ago in your subworld? Where did Mystic Fairy go? Maid? Who is Mystic Fairy? Taisetsu opened his mouth and then shivered. By the way, Senior, are you sure we're not chatting across servers? Fushi frowned at this time, then took out the 8 trigrams plate and began to turn it quickly. Until Taisetsu stared at it and felt a little sleepy. He slowly sighed and said, it seems that I haven't been back for a long time. It seems that we're really chatting across servers. Taisetsu also sighed. He also shook his head. Perhaps it was because they were both black souls at this time. He gradually forgot that the person in front of him was the one who had the legend of the Huaxia Emperor. Ancestor. It was not known what Fushi was thinking at this moment. After a while, he suddenly said, in my era, the maid who served the master was the Mystic Maiden, but the Mystic Maiden was not in charge of the work of the Black Soul. She did not have the qualifications. As for now, there's a process that I can't predict. It seems that in these years when I haven't been back, a lot of things have happened in the Holy Land. Holy Land? Taisetsu really couldn't take it anymore. Senior, are you sure you and I have the same name? No, the same company? Fushi just shook his head at this time, seemingly unwilling to say more. Don't worry. Whether it's the place you work now or the place I used to be, it's essentially the same place. The name isn't that important. I just didn't expect that my original master had changed a long time ago. Taisetsu knew that Luachio just took over the shop not long ago, and there was another person before Luachio. But the name of the club already existed before Luachio, but Fushi called it the Holy Land. Taisetsu was stunned. Didn't this mean that there was a boss before Luachio's previous boss? Senior, can I ask, the shop in your era, the Holy Land, what's the name of its master? Taisetsu even held his breath at this time. Fushi shook his head. I can't remember. What? Taisetsu opened his mouth. Fushi said rather helplessly, I really can't remember whether it's the name or the appearance of my previous master. It seems that after the change of master, the Holy Land may have unilaterally deleted my memory. This 8 trigrams disc was specially made by me, and I used it to make a calculation. I found that the history of the past is complicated, like the water of a lake that has been stirred up. I can't see it clearly. Taisetsu completely believed this point, because he knew that the current master, Luachio, had the ability to turn on or turn off other people's perception at will, and this ability to control other people's perception was gradually to the extent of adding or deleting other people's memories at will. Taisetsu suddenly gasped at this time. He seemed to have come into contact with something that he shouldn't know casually. According to his previous experience, in this case, he was in danger of being killed at any time. He even felt that there might be a shocking secret behind the shop he was working in now because of Fushi's words. You don't have to panic. Fushi suddenly said indifferently. You don't have to worry, because no matter what you were worried about, since you became in Black Soul, your life soul has been placed in the Soul Hall of the Holy Land. Your life and death is in the hands of the Holy Land. In this case, no matter what the will of the Holy Land is, even if it directly erases you, you have no possibility of resistance. Taisetsu naturally understood the meaning of the words, but he didn't understand another thing. Soul Hall, the place where the Black Soul Life Soul was stored. But in the club, shouldn't the Ark of the Covenant be used to store the life lamp of the Black Soul? Soul Hall and Ark of the Covenant, were they not the same thing? Wait, Senior, may I ask, Origin level Black Souls and ordinary Black Souls, their life souls are placed separately? Taisetsu suddenly asked. They're all placed in the Soul Hall. They're not placed separately. Why do you ask? Fushi couldn't help but ask curiously. Taisetsu shook his head and said without blushing, No, I'm just curious. After all, this is the first time I've encountered Origin level Black Soul. Fushi smiled at this time, as if he agreed with this idea. He continued the previous topic and said, Because the life soul of the Black Soul is placed in the Soul Hall, it can guarantee the loyalty of the Black Soul to the Holy Land. On the contrary, if the Soul Hall doesn't exist, or if the Soul Hall is destroyed, the Black Soul Life Soul in the Soul Hall will escape. Then the Black Soul will have freedom. Of course, this kind of situation naturally won't happen in the Holy Land, so, as a Black Soul, it's fine as long as you know your place. Taisetsu nodded, indicating that he understood. But why did this 9th beginning Black Soul Fushi mention this? Was he hinting at something? However, Taisetsu didn't intend to be too rash before he figured out the details of the Black Soul Fushi. He thought quickly, By the way, Senior, when I came here, you told me whether the Master asked me to urge you to go back. Why did you ask me this? Black Soul Fushi said casually, Because I'm on vacation. In fact, my vacation hasn't ended yet, but because of some accidents, my consciousness woke up. I thought that there was still a long time before my vacation, so I simply pretended that I didn't know and continued my vacation. Of course, I think the Holy Land. Oh, now it's the shop you mentioned. I think it may know, so it will call me back sooner or later. But it seems that I've waited for a long time until you appeared. I just didn't expect that the owner of the Holy Land has changed. This explanation reminded Taisetsu of a piece of news he had seen before. A veteran was stationed in the wilderness to carry out a secret mission. In order not to be discovered by the enemy, the veteran even gave up all means of communication. He waited for decades. Later, he was found and taken out. Only then did he know that the war had ended in the second year of the veteran's mission. I don't believe you. Taisetsu glanced at the 8 trigrams plate that Black Soul Fushi had put away. If the origin, level Black Soul, was such a powerful character, how could it not know that the owner of the shop had changed? But what if it was true? If Onyx Soul Fushi was telling the truth when he said that he had forgotten about his previous owner? Did that mean that the Onyx Souls of the same era as Onyx Soul Fushi had been tampered with as well, to the extent that they were unable to know about the change in owner? What are you thinking about? Black Soul Fushi looked at Taisetsu and asked. Oh, nothing. Dash shook his head and said quickly with a quick mind, I'm just thinking, since Senior already knows now, then do you plan to go back and so on? Black Soul Fushi nodded and muttered, logically speaking, since the owner of the Holy Land has changed as a Black Soul, we do need to meet him. But since the owner of the Holy Land has changed and I haven't been summoned back, I think there might be some secrets. Moreover, my holiday has already been allowed. Now that the holiday hasn't ended, it's reasonable that I don't go back for the time being. After all, it's the relationship between me and the young master. It's better to wait for the young master to grow up. I'm afraid he will feel pressure. Are all the old employees so arrogant? Is it really good for you to be so direct? Taisetsu just smiled and didn't say anything. Although he really didn't know how powerful the origin level Black Soul was, his intuition told him that his boss wasn't afraid of it at all. By the way, Senior, Daz thought of something at this time. The sovereigns of the Transcendence Organization, don't tell me they are all origin level Black Souls like you. Why do you think so? Black Soul Fushi asked curiously. Taisetsu said embarrassedly, because in my place, this kind of thing often happens. The bosses in the underworld are mostly undercover. Only their underlings are fighting and killing. Haha, this is so boring. Black Soul Fushi shook his head and said, among the sovereign-level Black Souls and the sovereign-level Black Souls, I don't know if there are other sovereign-level Black Souls. Only the owner of the Holy Land knows. So, even if there are 2 origin-level Black Souls, no matter how good their relationship is, as long as one of them is on holiday, it is impossible for them to know each other. This is to ensure the safety of the Black Souls on holiday. What do you mean? Taisetsu frowned. Black Soul Fushi said indifferently. Resources are limited. When there are fewer people, the remaining people will naturally get more. If I know that you are also a Black Soul and that you are weaker than me, I can eat you and take everything from you. And this, the Holy Land, tacitly allows it. Taisetsu's heart jumped at this time. Black Souls. Could it be that there's a relationship between them? Daz could not help but clench his fists subconsciously. Chapter 1480. Facing Taisetsu's subtle action at this time, Onyx Soul Fushi smiled slowly. Little guy, why are you afraid that I will eat you here? Taisetsu relaxed and shrugged. Of course I'm afraid, but it seems that being afraid is useless. Moreover, if you really want to eat me, I'm afraid that I won't be able to resist from the moment I came in, right? No, it should be that when I passed through the light door, there was probably no chance. Senior, the light door that I entered should have some kind of scanning function, right? It was you who helped me secretly and let me pass through smoothly. Onyx Soul Fushi waved his hand and said indifferently, it seems that the new master used the highest standard of source of foreign body to create you, and it's not without reason. I'm afraid you don't know that Boss Luo actually didn't have any concept of source of foreign body at that time, so he used so much of it without any pressure. As for Miss Maid, she turned a blind eye to her master's prodigal behavior. Taisetsu shook his head secretly. He was not as good as Onyx Soul Fushi imagined him to be. This was also the reason why he had been killing monsters in the dimensional crack to level up, and also to get some materials to fill up the material warehouse. I'm probably lucky to have met a benefactor when I went out, Taisetsu said casually. You have a good temperament, but you still have some obsession that you can't let go of. Onyx Soul Fushi said coldly. This is why you are still stuck at the last step and can't reach the limit of humanization. But don't worry, anyway, you're still young. How long have you been Onyx Soul? 300 years? 200 years? More than half a year. Let's take it as 300 years. Onyx Soul Fushi nodded. Now time and space are chaotic. I can only use the 8 trigrams to make a rough guess. I know that you just transformed recently, but 300 years is indeed a short time. It's really rare for you to have such achievements. 300 years is indeed a short time. Do you have any misunderstanding about time? You flatter me. Taisetsu cupped his fists, exuding the aura of the Jianghu. Black Soul Fushi said, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in eating you. For black souls like me, it's not useful to devour black souls below origin to strengthen ourselves. At most, we'll just rob them of their merit points. But in fact, which black soul of origin lacks merit points? So you can rest assured. In other words, when I reach the origin level one day, I will become your prey, right?" Daz glanced at this black soul Fushi, but saw that the other party was just looking at him with a sincere face at this time. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He was still secretly vigilant, thinking that if the other party really intended to do something to him, then he would just slash all the way out. Even if he couldn't escape, he could just self-destruct and resurrect through the Ark of the Covenant. The boss would probably revive him, probably. "Senior, did you create this transcendence organization before or after you woke up?" Taisetsu immediately asked another question. Onyx Soul Fushi was not surprised that Taisetsu asked this question. He immediately said, "The last war of the old generation caused the number of powerhouses in the crevice to dwindle. After the war, space-time was turbulent, and the new powerhouses lost their direction in their original subworlds. In order to let the crevice prosper again, the Holy Land did have the intention to cultivate again. But at that time, the person who carried out this mission wasn't me. I was on vacation. After I woke up, I was already in this organization. In fact, even I haven't seen all the thrones here. I only know that at the very beginning, there was indeed someone who took the lead in doing this. Moreover, in the crevice, there's more than one organization similar to the Transcendence. From what I know, there's also an organization called the Secret Society and the Gate of Truth. They were also led by someone at the very beginning. The Secret Society, the Gate of Truth? Taisetsu's curiosity was immediately aroused. However, Onyx Soul Fushi said indifferently, "These two organizations are very low-key. They basically don't walk in the crevice. The Secret Society is just like its name. Its members are secretive and are only silently searching for the path of origin. As for the Gate of Truth, it's a little strange. Its members are scattered in various subworlds, and it seems like they're looking for a path in the opposite direction." "What is a path in the opposite direction?" Taisetsu blinked. Onyx Soul Fushi slowly said, "If you don't move forward, you will move backward. Moving forward is the end, and moving backward is the origin. The end is the origin." Taisetsu shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. However, he silently noted it down. At the same time, he thought of another matter from Onyx Soul Fushi's narration. "Senior, now that you have awakened and are the throne of this Transcendence organization, do you plan to keep this throne in the future?" "Why not?" Onyx Soul Fushi smiled and said, "The Transcendence organization has transcendence from various subworlds. They're like gems that have been carefully selected. What is the essence of Onyx Soul? Am I not already in a treasure mountain?" "That's true, but I asked a stupid question." Taisetsu bitterly smiled. This Onyx Soul Fushi was clearly not willing to go back because he was opening a farm when he needed to use performance. As long as he casually grabbed someone from the Transcendence organization, he would be a good customer. Onyx Soul Fushi said, "Don't belittle yourself. 300 years is not enough for you to see the essence of Onyx Soul. But this matter cannot be rushed. When you reach the origin level, your vision will naturally be different. At that time, you will naturally not be interested in the people in the subworlds." Taisetsu smiled and did not say anything. 300 years might be extremely short for Onyx Soul Fushi, but for the current him, not to mention 300 years, even 3 years was very long. If his vision could not keep up, then so be it. After all, he had never been so ambitious. By the way, since you are not here to urge me to go back, then why did you enter the crevice this time? Onyx Soul Fushi finally threw out this question. Taisetsu had long expected that Onyx Soul Fushi would ask this question and had already thought of an answer. Actually, it's nothing much, mainly to train myself. The Void Original Demons here are very good opponents. Through fighting with them, I can improve faster. Onyx Soul Fushi nodded and said, the origin of foreign bodies is extracted from the Void Original Demons. It is equivalent to the essence of the original demons. Since our Onyx Soul body uses the origin of foreign bodies as a foundation, then when fighting with the original demons, it is beneficial to stimulate the activity of the origin of foreign bodies. Therefore, in terms of purely increasing one's strength, it is indeed very effective. Taisetsu could not help but stare blankly. So there is such a layer of logic behind it. No wonder at the beginning, he was directly thrown here to kill small monsters to level up. So this place is really a treasure trove for leveling up? How about this? Onyx Soul Fushi waved his hand at this moment, and a bright light instantly shot in front of Taisetsu. This was actually an oval-shaped badge. The front of the badge was an yin-yang fish, and the back of the badge was a picture of the 8 trigrams. This is my token. The Eternal Night Palace's Colosseum should still have some leftover original demons. If you need them, take this and enter the Colosseum. Musashi knows what to do. At the beginning, he had more or less met the throne to join the guild so that it would be convenient for him to enter the Colosseum to kill small monsters. Taisetsu now felt a sense of unexpected joy. It is indeed easier to do things when there is someone at the top. Senior this? You are from the same sect, so you should take care of each other. Onyx Soul Fushi chuckled. Then the 8 trigrams in his hand directly flew out and actually flew above Taisetsu's head. Then, a pillar of light shot out from the 8 trigrams and directly enveloped Taisetsu. Taisetsu's hairs stood up at this moment, and his body tensed up. The clear sable sword's key surged and was about to shoot out to fight Onyx Soul Fushi. Unexpectedly, Onyx Soul Fushi waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous. Treat this as another greeting gift from me. It is true that we are from the same sect, but strictly speaking, I am also your senior. In the land of Yanhuang, it is not strange for a senior to give a junior a greeting gift." The 8 trigrams above Taisetsu's head quickly flew back to Onyx Soul Fushi's hand. At this moment, Taisetsu carefully inspected his body and found that there was nothing wrong with it. The clear sable sword also did not give any warning. He even felt that his mind was relaxed and his mood was at ease. He felt that his entire body was in an extremely good state. To put it in a more old-fashioned way, it was like eating a ginseng fruit. Senior you? Onyx Soul Fushi chuckled. Your foundation is very good, but 300 years is indeed too short. A good foundation does not mean that the rapid increase in strength will not bring about hidden dangers. I just want you to be able to use your strength more naturally and skillfully. Taisetsu casually waved his arm and felt that his strength was much smoother than before, and his control of the Onyx Soul body was much more precise. This feeling brought him joy, and he unknowingly revealed a smile on his face. Then, "Thank you very much, Senior." Taisetsu slowly exhaled and said, "Is there anything I can do for you, Senior?" Taisetsu was a sensible person. Since the Onyx Souls had a relationship of mutual cannibalism, there was no such thing as a free exchange between the Onyx Souls. Even the shop itself had to be paid for. Onyx Soul Fushi smiled and said, "It's very simple. You just need to go back and explain my situation to my new master." Taisetsu could not help but open his mouth. Onyx Soul Fushi's request was a little too simple. This was obviously not equal to the benefits he was going to give. Onyx Soul Fushi said indifferently, "I said, the relationship between me and my new master is that of an old servant and a young master. This time, you did not come under orders, but at the same time, you discover my current situation. Therefore, I need you to explain it to him on my behalf." Taisetsu basically understood. He could not find anything to nitpick about Onyx Soul Fushi's explanation. Onyx Soul Fushi obviously had the initiative in his hands. He really looks like an old official. "Don't worry, senior. I will report your situation truthfully when I go back," Taisetsu said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "including the matter that you helped me with. No wonder you can control the clear sable sword." Black Soul Fushi nodded with a smile. "All right, let's end our meeting today. It's about time for you to leave. If you stay too long among the thrones, you'll attract the attention of the other thrones." Taisetsu could not help but be shocked. He thought that he had hidden the clear sable sword very well, but he did not expect Onyx Soul Fushi to see through it at a glance. The ninth beginning, Onyx Soul Fushi, gave Taisetsu the feeling of mist made bottomless. If all the Onyx Souls at the beginning level were like Onyx Soul Fushi, then the Onyx Souls ranked before the ninth beginning, Taisetsu still had many questions in his heart. However, since he already knew that Onyx Soul Fushi was the throne of the Nirvana level organization, he would find a time to enter the Eternal Night Palace. Then, senior, Taisetsu will not disturb you any longer. Taisetsu cupped his fists. The reason he cupped his fists was because this was the only ancient etiquette he knew, taught by Jin Yong. "Let's go. I reckon Musashi is already impatient." Onyx Soul Fushi waved his hand, and a door of light opened behind Taisetsu. "When you see Musashi, tell him that I will remember his contribution." Daz nodded, turned around, and walked into the light gate. It was a clean and neat move. Then, the light shattered into pieces and disappeared with the wind. In the octagonal pavilion, Onyx Soul Fushi sat down again. He took out the 8 trigrams plate and placed it on the stone table. Then, he slowly turned the mechanism on the plate. He muttered as if he was talking to himself. "A gentleman is magnanimous, but not lacking in tact. Moreover, he can obtain the clear sable sword. Hidden Sword Girl, this will be your opponent in the future." The door of the small wooden house in the fire cloud cave suddenly opened. A little girl closed her eyes and walked out barefoot. Beside her, there were 9 small swords that flickered with different lights and shapes. "You are so long-winded. Hidden Sword doesn't like it." The little girl with her eyes closed said calmly. Onyx Soul Fushi laughed and said happily, "Little Sword Girl is still so cute. I really look forward to the day when you grow up." The little girl didn't say anything. She turned around and walked into the wooden house. Onyx Soul Fushi was still looking at her with a smile. At this moment, a cool breeze blew in the fire cloud cave. The wind blew away the ripples in the pond outside the wooden house. At the same time, it also blew Onyx Soul Fushi's long black hair. At the back of his head, when his long hair was slightly blown away by the wind, a pair of strange eyes could be vaguely seen. This Taisetsu, even if he isn't at the origin level, he seems to be quite tasty. Chapter 1481. When Taisetsu walked out of the door of light, the first thing he saw was Musashi waving the sword in his hand. Some people's strength was not innate. For some reason, this sentence popped out directly in Daz's mind. He didn't make a sound, but silently watched Musashi's sword-swinging movement and compared it with his usual training. Taisetsu had been a normal person for a long time. He did not know anything about swordsmanship. When he first got the Zhanlu sword, Taisetsu felt that it was not as good as a watermelon knife. Yes, it was a normal watermelon knife. He held it in his hand and wrapped it tightly with bandages. It felt great to use it to cut people, and he did not have to worry about throwing it out. That was why he did not know anything about swordsmanship. He knew how to use swords now because he held the Zhanlu sword. It was as if the Zhanlu sword was transmitting information to him. The way Musashi waved the sword and the feeling it gave off was very different from how Taisetsu used the Zhanlu sword to fight. He could not tell what was different, but he felt like he suddenly understood a lot of things. However, the strange thing was that Musashi was only waving the sword normally. Taisetsu thought about it carefully, but he could not understand where this feeling came from. In the end, he could only attribute it to the pillar of light that Onyx Soul Fushi gave him. Actually, did I add an intelligence buff to myself? Oh, Taisetsu. Musashi was a powerful creature that came from Subworld. No matter how Taisetsu restrained himself, being too close to him still triggered his fighting instincts. He slowly put his Bajigoka Yasutsuna back in his scabbard and wiped his sweat. He smiled and said, "You're finally out. It seems like there's a result." Musashi felt that it was unnecessary to ask this question. Taisetsu, being able to safely come out from the throne, explained everything. "That throne gave me this." Taisetsu took out the badge that Onyx Soul Fushi had given him. He said, "You'll understand once you see it. So this is the proof that I've successfully joined the guild, right? Should I always carry it with me or only take it out when I need it? I don't think you have it with you." Unexpectedly, after Master Wu Chang's expression was slightly startled, he looked at Daz strangely. After a while, he said with a wry smile, "It's okay. You should put away this throne badge. In fact, I don't have this thing." Looking at Taisetsu's confused look, Musashi couldn't help but frown. Could it be that the throne didn't explain its use after giving you this badge? Taisetsu shook his head. He said that you can just look at it. "So, do I count as a member or not?" Actually, being able to come out of the throne means that you've officially joined the guild. After all, being able to come out means that you've received the throne as approval. As for this badge, Master Musashi pondered for a moment and said seriously, "Actually, this badge is also called the Throne Badge. Every throne has their own Throne Badge, and those who can get the Throne Badge will have a little change in their status in the organization." "Tell me." Taisetsu opened his mouth. He vaguely guessed that Onyx Soul Fushi didn't just give him a proof of joining the guild. Having the Throne Badge means that you've truly received the throne as approval. You can think of this as a standard for a normal member to become a throne. Musashi smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're now a quasi-throne. I didn't expect that a guy like me with no luck would be able to recruit a new quasi-throne member." Taisetsu looked at the badge in his hand in surprise. That ninth beginning, Onyx Soul Senior really knows how to play. Are the higher-ups in the organization so willful? Seeing that Taisetsu was so silent, Musashi couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong? You become a quasi-throne. Aren't you happy?" Taisetsu shook his head and said casually, "I'm just thinking if I have to endure until a throne retires or something like that before I can continue to be promoted. It's usually like this, right? When the one at the top retires, the one at the bottom will have a chance or something like that. Endure until the one at the top dies. Then you'll automatically be promoted. It's not that troublesome." Musashi shook his head and said, "In fact, the way for a quasi-throne to become throne is very simple. You already have a throne badge in your hand. Next, you just need to collect 7 other throne badges and gather 8 badges. Then, you'll be able to participate in the Battle of Throne. If you win in the end, you'll automatically be promoted to a throne. This is even more troublesome, by the way. Is there really someone who has gathered 8 badges?" Taisetsu couldn't help but ask curiously. Musashi said, "There must be at least 2 members who have gathered enough badges to start the Battle of Throne. Of course, since there is such a tradition, it means that such a battle has been held before, and there are indeed people who have become throne through the Battle of Throne. For example, last time, there was a beast tamer who, after going through many challenges, finally gathered enough badges and participated in the Battle of Throne. In the end, he defeated another opponent and was promoted to a throne. Leather God Throne." Taisetsu couldn't help but open his mouth. He felt like he had heard of the rules of the Battle of Throne somewhere before. As for the Leather God Throne, "Master Musashi, may I ask, is this Leather God Throne a yellow mouse that can self-generate electricity and pretend to be cute all day long?" Master Musashi said in shock, "Didn't I say that the Leather God Throne is a beast tamer? How can it be a mouse? But the Leather God Throne does have a cute yellow teacher beside it." Have you seen the Leather God Throne before?" "I haven't seen it with my own eyes." Taisetsu shook his head directly. He didn't know if he had seen it on TV, but wasn't that just a figment of his imagination? He suddenly thought of a problem, the problem of the subworld. The world he was in was very normal, so normal that Taisetsu couldn't even find a word to describe it, so he called it a normal world for the time being. However, through his understanding of the Master God plan, he knew that there were other subworlds that had taken the path of high-tech civilizations, and the experts in the crevice came from different subworlds. Was the composition of these subworlds varied? Master Musashi, I'll ask again, the subworlds connected to the dimensional crevice. How many are there? Musashi said. If you ask me how many I have traveled to, I can answer you that it's 379. But if you ask me how many there are, I can't answer you. If I have to say, it's probably infinite. Infinite? Taisetsu couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. Musashi said, in fact, there are subworlds that are destroyed at every moment, and new subworlds are born. The subworlds that we have been to before may have been destroyed and then reactivated to become another unfamiliar subworld. So no one can count how many subworlds there are. Even the thrones probably can't do it. However, although the number of subworlds can't be counted, in our long-term exploration, we have divided the subworlds into different types. Were they? Musashi thought for a while and said, generally, they're divided into the myth system, magic system, science system, and fantasy system. By the way, the Leather God throne seemed to be born from one of the subworlds of the fantasy system, but as for which subworld it is, I don't know. As for me, I'm from the myth system subworld. The subworld were divided into 4 major systems. The organization of the transcendence, the throne, the ninth beginning, Black Soul Fushi. Although there was no concept of time in the crack, Taisetsu felt that in this short period of time, the things that he came into contact with were completely out of his scope. He couldn't help but have a headache. There were too many things that he didn't know. Perhaps he should go back and ask the boss or Miss Maid. I'm also from the myth system. Taisetsu thought for a while. Since Musashi had introduced himself, then he wouldn't hide it completely. In the modern world where he was, since there was a Shinryu Kelowna and a monster like Kelowna, he should be from the myth system, right? Musashi just smiled and then said, well, since you have joined us and even have the throw emblem, then the next thing you need to do is to choose a place in the Lost Garden. Look at this star map. The red mark is already chosen. The blue mark and the green mark are both choices. Why are there only 2 choices? In front of him was a 3-dimensional map that looked like a huge star map. It was dazzling. Because you have the throne emblem, you'll naturally be treated better than ordinary members. Musashi explained with a smile. Like me, I can only choose from the green mark at the beginning. Actually, this is nothing. Ordinary members can also exchange for the blue mark later on with contribution points. Okay, then I'll choose this one. Taisetsu thought for a while and casually chose a place that was pleasing to the eye. It was an inconspicuous place at the bottom left of the star map. Well, this place will be your place in the future. Be careful in the future. Musashi didn't care about Taisetsu's carelessness. He just directly marked the place he chose with a red mark. After changing it to a red mark, Taisetsu found that there was a throne emblem below the mark. This was the throne emblem that Onyx Soul Fushi gave him. Hearing Musashi's reminder, Taisetsu's heart trembled. Then, he looked carefully and found that there was a similar emblem below some of the red marks. Moreover, there was more than one emblem below some of the red marks. Don't tell me. Someone is coming to fight with me? Yes, and it's very common. Musashi squinted at this time and said with a smile, especially a newcomer like you who got the throne emblem. You're really popular. Where did this third-rate novel come from? Taisetsu complained bitterly. Musashi laughed and said, third-rate novel is because it's cool to not have to use your brain. We don't need to use our brains for many things. Most of the things we do return to the most primitive method. Fist is enough. So theoretically, it's about the same. Master Musashi, you also... Didn't I say that I traveled to more than 300 subworlds? Musashi shrugged and said, there are subworlds of each system, but you don't have to be too nervous. If there is only one outstanding newcomer like you in the same batch, maybe you'll be under a lot of pressure. After all, There are several people who are only one emblem away from the qualification to participate in the battle. But recently, there are two outstanding newcomers in the same batch as you, and they are both accepted as students by the same throne. So, they can more or less share some of the challenges for you. You should dig out more of such outstanding newcomers. Taisetsu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect that there was such a trouble behind the things that Black Soul Fushi gave him. It still didn't work. No matter how careful he was with this kind of old monster, there would still be a time when he was careless. Let's not talk about outstanding rookies. Even rookies with passing standards are not easy to find. Musashi shook his head and said, "At present, there are fewer and fewer strong people who can break the limit of the subworlds and enter the dimensional crevice by themselves. Sometimes, we have to directly enter the subworlds to find those with potential. But the outstanding people in their own worlds are all ambitious. Without experiencing the dimensional crevice, they won't believe you no matter what you say. Okay, I'll take you to your residence. After that, only you or those who are allowed by you can enter your residence. Don't worry, we are still very good at protecting the privacy of our members. We definitely won't peek at what you do in your residence." Taisetsu smiled and didn't say anything. Probably, the time he would stay in his residence was limited. But before going to his residence, Taisetsu quickly found the name Musashi in the star map of his residence. He saw that under Musashi's name, there was also a throne emblem shining. There were a total of 6 throne emblems. Musashi, this guy. Speaking of which, before going to your residence, do you want to fight with me here? Musashi suddenly rubbed his chin and looked at Taisetsu, asking with a smile. "Go find those 2 newcomers." Taisetsu said grumpily. Master Musashi laughed and didn't force him. He directly opened the light door to his residence. At this moment, he suddenly said, "Oh right, the residence is quite spacious. If you often go out alone, I suggest you find 1 or 2 workers to take care of your residence. That will save you a lot of trouble." Taisetsu couldn't help but look back at Master Musashi and then said meaningfully, "I think the guy who lives in the stone house outside the Eternal Night Palace is quite good. Master Musashi, what do you think?" "Ayaya, then I really won't be able to do anything to you." "Newcomer." Taisetsu shrugged and said, "Master, let me go. I'm just a newcomer." "Newcomers are all monsters." "I understand." Master Musashi narrowed his eyes and slowly opened them. The hidden sharpness in his eyes was also released. Taisetsu couldn't help but be slightly moved. Without the clear sable sword, he might not be able to defeat Musashi. He even felt that this guy was much stronger than Nero. Nero? Nero? Who is that? Chapter 1482. However, this was not the time for Taisetsu to think about who Nero was and why he felt a sense of familiarity. The pressure emanating from Master Musashi made Taisetsu tense his muscles. "Master Musashi, you are the guard here. Isn't it inappropriate for you to fight here?" Taisetsu frowned. He felt that Onyx Soul Fushi gave him the throne emblem not to make things easier for him, but to cause trouble. It doesn't matter. The Eternal Night Palace has an automatic repair function. Master Musashi slowly pulled out the Bakigwo Yasetsuna from his waist. "I just need to feed a few more void original demons to the floor of the square." Unexpectedly, Daz sighed slowly at this time. Then he did something that surprised Musashi. He was dumbfounded. Daz actually threw the throne emblem in his hand to Musashi at this time. "What are you doing?" Musashi caught it and frowned. Taisetsu said indifferently, "If you want this, I can give it to you directly. There's no need to fight. I'm just a newbie. I'm very weak. I can't take a beating." Musashi's eyebrows had been tightly knitted the entire time, and only then did they slowly loosen. He shook his head and threw the throne insignia in his hand over. He said dully, boring. When you want to make a move, just come and find me. I will be in the Eternal Night Palace." "Okay, next time." Taisetsu nodded seriously. But in his heart, he thought that after leaving the crevice, he would definitely not come here before he figured out the situation. He had caused a lot of trouble for no reason. It was more comfortable to water the manor, cut the grass, and be a salted fish. "It's a deal." Musashi smiled expectantly. I'll take you to your residence. You'll like it. After all, every residence is an independent space. This is a space created by the thrones by collecting world fragments. It's enough for people to live in. World fragment. Musashi smiled. To be exact, it's a fragment of a subworld. Of course, it's not wasteful to use a whole subworld fragment for living. Usually, it'll be broken into several or dozens of pieces depending on the size of the fragment used. Of course, you can decorate it freely in your residence. After all, other than being attached to Paradise Lost, it's like your private territory. Your benefits look good. Taisetsu finally sighed. If he was not working for Boss, he would probably be moved by the benefits of the Transcendence organization. This is just the basics. In the future, Master Musashi's voice suddenly stopped. At this moment, he felt a slight vibration came from outside the palace. Of the void's original void, original demons might have appeared. I remember that the nearby Area 2s should have been cleared. Should be a little lost. I remember that the nearby area should have been cleared. Wait for me here. I'll come over when I'm done. Since I have nothing to do, I'll go with you. Taisetsu stepped forward. He took the initiative because he got along well with Musashi. Master Musashi didn't say much. He nodded and walked out quickly. Vaguely, he had an ominous feeling. While he was on his guard, he also felt an inexplicable sense of irritation. But when Musashi and Taisetsu walked out of the Eternal Night Palace together, they didn't expect to run into King of Hun Attila, who had just left. At this moment, there was a monster about 12 meters tall lying beside Attila. It was purplish-white all over. Void's original demon. This original demon looked like a combination of a bull and a beetle. It had a huge bull's head, thick and short limbs, and an extremely sturdy carapace on its back. The original demon's body was wrapped around by the whip in King of Hun's hand. It couldn't move at all. Its eyes were tightly shut, as if it had been knocked unconscious. This fellow's mass shouldn't be small. The tremor in the Eternal Night Palace just now was very likely caused by this huge original demon crashing to the ground. The front of the Eternal Night Palace wasn't a plaza, so there was no need to worry about the original demon being swallowed by the plaza's floor. King of Hun, what are you doing? Musashi frowned. King of Hun Attila laughed out loud. I'm bored in my residence, so I'm going to find another world to play with. I ran into this thing on the way, so I grabbed it along the way. Musashi, I'll leave it to you. Store it in the Colosseum. Master Musashi sized up this original demon and said mildly, "What kind of species is this? It's rare, isn't it?" Attila shrugged and withdrew the whip that was wrapped around the original demon. How would I know? Perhaps it's a new species. All right, I'll leave the rest to you. I won't keep you company. Take care, I won't see you out. Master Wuchang said indifferently. King of Hun saw Taisetsu behind Master Musashi at this moment. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. Just as he was about to say something, Musashi beat him to it. He's already seen the Fushi throne and is now a member of the organization. He just chose his residence. King of Hun, are you going to welcome a newcomer? A newcomer. King of Hun looked at Taisetsu in surprise. No one knew what he was thinking, but his gaze was like that of a venomous snake, giving off a hot and chilling feeling. King Attila laughed nastily. A newcomer is good. I just don't know how this newcomer compares to the two who are currently in the limelight. If he's too bad, it's best he doesn't leave his residence. King Attila, if you know Taisetsu, Musashi snorted, but was suddenly interrupted by Taisetsu behind him. Taisetsu took a step forward and said loudly, I'm a homebody. If I don't have to go out, I won't go out. It's just right for me to stay in my residence. Senior, Boobs, Slave King, I wonder if you have a delivery service here? If the delivery guy could deliver food to where I live, I wouldn't have to leave the house. The days are long. There's no hurry. The Hun Emperor laughed out loud. The Fushi throne is such a nice person. Sigh. If this king had met the Fushi throne back then, it would have been very convenient. If you had met that old guy, you would have been tricked. That guy's definitely a kind old trapper. Okay, I get along quite well with Fushi Throne. Taisetsu smiled and said, I'll introduce you to each other another day, or you can go to Fire Cloud Cave yourself. Remember to tell him my name, and he'll let you in. A junior who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The Hun Emperor coldly snorted. King of Hun, are you going or staying? I'm not interested in accompanying you to enjoy the scenery here. I'm very busy. Master Musashi couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. It seemed that he was quite happy to see this scene. He wasn't very sure whether Taisetsu was really a super expert or not, but he was sure of one thing. That was, Taisetsu was definitely the king of verbal canon. King of Hun waved his whip, rolled it up, and hung it on his waist. After that, he revealed a strange smile and turned to leave without saying a word. Taisetsu and Musashi looked at each other. Musashi frowned and said, You have to be careful of this guy in the future. Don't be confused by his words and actions. This king of Hun is not only cruel, but also very insidious. Taisetsu couldn't help but ask curiously, This kind of guy can break the limit of a subworld and ascend to the dimensional crevice? Master Musashi said, Attila was born in a subworld of the myth system. I don't know the details, but I heard that he was the king of his own subworld. Later on, after sacrificing more than half of his people, he forcefully corrupted an ancient god of his own subworld and seized the divinity of the ancient god. He used this to break free from the shackles of his subworld, but whether this is true or not, I can't say for sure. Sacrificing more than half of his people, Taisetsu opened his mouth. He felt that with Attila's cruel personality, it was very likely that he would do such a thing. This group of supreme experts weren't easy to get along with. Taisetsu recalled the star map he saw when he was choosing his residence. There were at least a few hundred residences marked in red. He didn't know if this included the residence of the throne. Actually, examples like the King of Hun are rare. Master Musashi probably saw through Taisetsu's thoughts and said with a pleasant expression, Compared to the King of Hun, most of us relied on our own efforts to get to where we are now. You can't judge a leopard through a tube and be blinded by a single leaf. But I know that a rat's pee can spoil a pot of soup. Taisetsu secretly shook his head. He felt that he still had the mentality of a small citizen. He couldn't compare with the level of thought of these supreme experts, and he didn't want to get close to them. He still wanted to settle the matter here as soon as possible and return to his own subworld. But Master Musashi was disturbed by something else. At this time, Master Wuchang took out a red gem, and the gem flashed 3 times in succession. Master Wuchang's eyes also revealed a touch of light. What happened? Taisetsu frowned and asked. Master Musashi said, Taisetsu, you're in luck. You just arrived, and there's already a good show to watch. Someone went up to the dueling arena. Dueling arena? Master Musashi nodded and said, It's usually used to fight for the emblem of the throne. Of course, sometimes it's also used to settle personal conflicts between members of the organization. Remember, it's a dueling arena, not a life or death arena. The dueling arena has a set of judging mechanism jointly created by the throne. It only determines victory and defeat, not life and death. After all, for the organization, every member is an extremely important comrade. It would be a pity if they died because of an ordinary fight. Comrade? It's probably an extremely important resource. Thinking of the Black Soul Fushi in the Supreme Expert Organization, Taisetsu couldn't help but worry about the future of this organization. Master Musashi, the higher-ups of this organization are loyal to our traitors on our side. Then let's go take a look. Taisetsu casually suggested. Just take it as a chance to understand the level of the members of the Supreme Expert Organization. Since we're already here, there's no harm in asking for more information back. All right, wait for a moment. Musashi waved his hand and directly lifted up the bull-headed beetle-like original void demon that Attila had placed in front of the door. I'll be back soon. Taisetsu nodded and watched as Master Musashi quickly walked into the Eternal Night Palace. This original void demon still didn't move, but for some reason, Taisetsu felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with this guy. Perhaps I've killed something similar in the past, but there were at least 8,000 original void demons that had been killed by his hands, if not 10,000. How could he remember clearly? As for Musashi, it only took him a short while to return. Clearly, his attention was drawn to the battle on the dueling platform. Naturally, he wasn't in the mood to care about this primordial void demon. He simply threw it into the arena and was done with it. The dueling arena of the Supreme Experts was an area marked gray in the star map of their residences. In Musashi's words, it was because the difference in power between the Supreme Experts was too great and the arena was too small for them to use their full strength. As such, a relatively large subworld fragment was used to build the arena. This dueling arena was divided into many settings. As for the setting chosen by both parties, it was a circular platform with a diameter of 1 kilometer. When Taisetsu arrived with Musashi, he saw hundreds of huge floating stones floating on the circular platform. On the floating stones, there were already spectators standing in groups of 2s and 3s. There were also some who stood alone on a floating stone, far away from the crowd. There were about 100 of them. Taisetsu quickly scanned them, but couldn't immediately determine the depth of these guys. He shook his head and shifted his gaze to the center of the huge circular platform, observing the battle between the two Supreme Experts. As expected, it's a battle for the emblem of the throne. As the guardian of the Eternal Night Palace, Master Musashi clearly knew about most of the members. At this moment, he introduced them to Taisetsu. Do you see them? The taller one is called Desert Eagle. It comes from a subworld of the magic system and is good at using a type of magic attack. It's very good in terms of damage output, but it's lacking in speed and defense. Even so, Desert Eagle has 3 emblems of the throne. Its strength shouldn't be underestimated. Hearing this, Taisetsu quietly tightened his grip on the throne emblem in his pocket. He still felt that it wasn't safe, so he simply stuffed the emblem back into the secret pocket of his pants. You didn't see wrong. It was the kind of pocket that old people would see sewn with a needle and thread to store money in when they went out in the past. Master Musashi opened his mouth at Taisetsu's behavior, but he pretended that he didn't see it. His expression didn't change as he continued the introduction. As for Desert Eagle's opponent, it's Erex. I haven't found out which subworld he comes from yet. Currently, I only know that he's a student of the throne. He's one of the 2 super newcomers I mentioned to you before. Taisetsu blinked and looked curiously at the man in the center with a tall hat and a smile on his face. Erex? Chapter 1483. At this time, Taisetsu didn't know who Erex was. He didn't even feel that the name was familiar, because until now, he had only met Erex in the duel arena of Paradise Lost. Looking at Desert Eagle and Erex, who were preparing for a duel on the platform, Des only intuitively felt that Erex's chances of winning seemed to be higher. But in fact, judging from the discussions on the floating stones around the platform, they seemed to be more optimistic about Desert Eagle. Most of those guys are from the subworld of magic. Master Musashi said non-committally, they always think that magic is the most powerful force in all categories and the only way to get close to the ultimate. Taisetsu couldn't help but ask curiously, what about you? Master Musashi, what do you think? Do you also think that your swordsmanship is the strongest? Unexpectedly, Musashi shook his head and said, if I grew up in a subworld of magic, I'd be more willing to learn the power of magic. Huh? Master Musashi shrugged and said, don't you think that it's more comfortable to stand and attack than to rush up and attack randomly? And magicians generally have better skin, unlike warriors who have rougher skin. Master Musashi, a man should also live a more delicate life. Master Musashi said seriously, I think you're born with good skin and tender flesh. Don't forget to develop in the direction of a rough man. Hearing that, Taisetsu took a step back. At this time, on a floating stone in the distance, there suddenly appeared a charming man in red clothes. That's right, it was a man, because Taisetsu saw his Adam's apple. The charming man in red clothes was looking at Master Musashi with a smile. I'll go ahead and say hello. You wait for me here. Master Musashi said directly at this time, "The duel is about to start. Don't leave the stand unless it's necessary." Most of the supreme level people are not willing to admit defeat. Don't affect the duel, or you'll be criticized in the future. Master Musashi, have fun. Taisetsu nodded and then stepped back a little bit. Master Musashi stepped on several floating stones and easily went to the floating stone of the charming man in red clothes. Vaguely, he seemed to hear Master Musashi calling the man's name, Long Yang. Taisetsu listened carefully, but found that the voices of Master Musashi and the man in red clothes were no longer heard. It seemed that they were isolated. But looking at the soft whispers when the two were talking, Des couldn't help but shudder. He quickly paid attention to the duel on the stage. He had already listened to the chatter between the spectators around him with rapt attention. This newcomer has good courage. He hasn't been here for long. Although the throne recognized him and took him in as a student and gave him the emblem of the throne, it would be better for him to cultivate for a while. He's still too anxious to show off. You're talking as if you weren't anxious to show off before. Before we entered the dimensional crevice, which one of us wasn't an all-powerful existence in this world? But what is the dimensional crevice? After coming here, it's inevitable to feel a sense of loss. Isn't it normal to be anxious to show off at this time? Moreover, it's better to see the present clearly, face your own situation, and adjust your mentality. That's true. After all, he's also a student of the Beggar Sand Throne. But compared to this person, the other new student of the Beggar Sand Throne is obviously more composed. He's still in closed-door training. I don't know how strong he is. Oh, you're talking about that Lai something, right? Lai Kaisheng. I think that's his name. It's marked on the star map of his residence. He's really mysterious. He's been here for a while, but he hasn't shown up yet. But this Arex is a little more active. Shoo, they're starting. Don't be noisy. After listening to the passerby NPC intelligence-type dialogue of the Transcendence, Des also paid more attention to the two sides of the battle. But Lai Kaisheng? Could this Lai Kaisheng be the young leader of the Cotton sect who had cheated the entire Taoist and demon realms of the Divine Land in the Mount Tai incident? How could he become the sovereign student in such a short time? Beggar Sand Throne. This name is so hard to pronounce. Taisetsu shook his head. Looking at Desert Eagle and Arex on the duel stage, he frowned. Not only him, but some of the spectators also had the same reaction. The duel had been going on for a while, but Desert Eagle and Arex didn't move at all. They just stood there silently. Suddenly, Desert Eagle moved. He waved his hand, and a terrifying number of magic attacks fell on the duel stage from all directions. The power of these magic attacks made Taisetsu speechless. Master Musashi's words seemed to make sense. It was indeed comfortable to attack while standing still, but no matter how Desert Eagle kept attacking, those powerful magic attacks couldn't hit Arex. Arex also moved at this moment. He smiled and walked slowly towards Desert Eagle in a straight line. The amazing thing was that the magic attacks controlled by Desert Eagle seemed to completely ignore Arex. So many powerful attacks, but they all missed. It was a straight line. Is this Desert Eagle purposely going easy on him? PY. It must be a PY deal. I refuse to accept a fake match. But no matter how dissatisfied some people were, Desert Eagle still couldn't hit Arex. Moreover, his face gradually showed a frightened expression, and Arex finally came to the front of Desert Eagle. At this moment, Desert Eagle suddenly stopped. His hands hung down naturally, and so did his head. Arex suddenly snapped his fingers. Desert Eagle trembled slightly, and then sat down on the ground. He was sweating profusely and gasping for breath. There was a trace of fear in his eyes. Did you have a good dream? Arex suddenly bowed to Desert Eagle. Thank you for your advice, Senior Desert Eagle. What did you say? I haven't. Deagle's words suddenly stopped. From Arex's sleeve, a thin and long sword was pointed at his throat. I lost. Desert Eagle opened his mouth and finally sighed helplessly. At the same time, a beam of light suddenly fell into Arex's hand. In his palm, there were two throne emblems. It seemed that before the duel began, Both parties had already put out the emblems at the same time, and only the winner could take them all. "Thank you for your hospitality, Senior Desert Eagle." Erex took off his top hat, bowed to Desert Eagle, and then turned to leave. Erex directly pressed the teleport button of his residence, and then disappeared from this dual space. Before the others could understand Erex's last sentence, Desert Eagle seemed to have thought of something and directly got up. He didn't pay attention to those who were familiar with him and were also from the subworld of Magic System. He lowered his head and hurriedly pressed the teleport button, leaving the dual platform. It was very puzzling, but they thought it was because Desert Eagle was shocked and didn't want to talk to others at this time. Looking at Desert Eagle, I'm afraid that Erex is not as simple as we thought. He may be very good at illusions. Well, no wonder he's chosen by the Sand Throne. That's right. Newcomers are all monsters. This is very normal. But since we know that Erex is good at illusions, we just need to prepare more to deal with them. You guys, that's not what you said before. Taisetsu couldn't help but think of the disdainful look of Miss Maid when she talked about the subworld. It seemed that there was some basis to it. At this time, seeing that the others were still actively discussing, Taisetsu felt a bit bored. Then, he saw that Master Musashi and the charming man in red disappeared. He looked around but couldn't find them. Taisetsu frowned, thought for a while, and then had to go back. Master Musashi hadn't closed the light door since he opened it in the Eternal Night Palace. The spectators in the arena had already gradually left. On a certain floating rock, two figures descended. Master Wu Chong and the charming man in red clothes. Master Musashi walked in at this time, picking up a stone in front of the light door. There were some simple carvings on it, the general content of which was, "I'm going back first." This was what Taisetsu carved on the stone before he left. Maybe he was worried that the words couldn't be understood or something. This guy is so meticulous. The charming man in red smiled gently at this time. "Well, a meticulous boy is always liked from the bottom of my heart. Musashi, you're so mean, you have to stop me." Master Musashi directly said in an unkind tone, "Come on, Long Yang-jun, I don't want the newcomers to think that our organization is full of gays. You know what kind of person you are." Red, Long Yang-jun smiled at this time. "Among so many people, only Musashi can't win my favor. My patience is limited." Musashi shook his head. Then, without warning, he fished out something from the ground and threw it to Lord Long Yang. What he threw to Lord Long Yang was, shockingly, an emblem of a throne. Master Musashi said expressionlessly at this time, "After you beat the king of Hun into the subworld and make him unable to rise again, this thing is yours." Wow, he's so generous. He gave me a throne emblem right away. Long Yang-jun played with this throne emblem in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to put it away. "But you want me to fight with just one emblem?" Musashi said indifferently. "Attila also has an emblem, including mine. It's enough for you to gather 8 emblems and start the battle of the throne. But I have to risk violating the rules set by the throne." Master Musashi directly looked at Long Yang-jun and said, "When you become a throne, naturally it won't be considered breaking the rules. If you don't want to do it, return the emblem to me. There are many people who are willing to fight. That's why it's so hard for Musashi to please me." Long Yang-jun shook his head, looked into the distance with a sad face, and seemed to be talking to himself. "I suddenly missed the little brother I met last time. Oh, then I really feel sad for the little brother you mentioned from the bottom of my heart." Musashi stretched at this time and directly laid down on the floating stone, scratching his butt, and looking at Long Yang-jun, he said, "If there's nothing, don't disturb my afternoon nap. It's quiet here. I'll wait for your news here." Why didn't Musashi go back to the Eternal Night Palace to guard the gate? Long Yang-jun asked in surprise. Musashi yawned and said, "There was a fight between the members of the Eternal Night Palace, but as the guard, I didn't rush to stop it because I had to clean up the dueling platform. I'm really sorry. Then I'll move around a bit." Long Yang-jun smiled and walked through the gate. At this time, Long Yang-jun only heard Master Musashi behind him say lazily, "Don't tear down the Eternal Night Palace. It's troublesome to clean it up." Long Yang-jun looked back and said with a smile, You're really a cunning man. But it's also where your charm lies, Musashi. Get lost. Musashi waved his hand, and a sword light came out from his palm, directly splitting the light gate. Of course, Long Yongjun had already disappeared into the light gate. Master Musashi shook his head and picked his nose. Sword chi is really a good skill. Even if I don't know magic, I can still stand and attack. This is much better than a rotten, or God knows what bad things he did with the, or Brother Chong? Brother Chong, Yudan Xiang? After returning to the Eternal Night Palace, Taisetsu was a little bored waiting. He thought of Yudan Xiang, who was still in the stone hut, and directly walked over. The square outside the Eternal Night Palace was much wider than a round platform of the dueling platform. But the stone hut was empty at this time. Taisetsu walked into the stone hut and only saw a small knife on the ground. In addition, the hut was a little messy, but he didn't see Yudan Xiang. Did he run out? Taisetsu picked up the knife on the ground and couldn't help but frown. While he was puzzling, he found a claw-like mark on the ground, which was now slowly mending itself. He remembered that Musashi said that the square of the Eternal Night Palace had the ability to automatically repair itself. This claw mark should have been made not long ago. But why would Yudan Xiang destroy the stone hut's floor for no reason? He was suddenly startled and remembered the second time he met King of Hunatilla. There was an indescribable, strange feeling in his heart. Then, as if he vaguely thought of something, he rushed into the Eternal Night Palace without looking back and ran directly to the Colosseum here. That purple-white original void demon in the shape of a bullhead beetle, could it be? That's right, I've become stronger, but not strong enough. I still want to become stronger. I want to become the most handsome boy in the whole village. No, I want to become the most handsome boy in the whole city. I want the whole world to be filled with my fish balls. So, I think you're actually a good person, so you must have something good about you. Please don't get into trouble. Chapter 1484. The door opened, and Taisetsu walked straight in. This was the door that led directly to the bestial battle arena. Just as Master Musashi had said, after entering the bestial battle arena from the outside, one's body would be shrunk. Taisetsu finally felt the vastness of the bestial battle arena. The bestial battle arena wasn't a simple arena. Instead, it was divided into 4 different areas that corresponded to different climates. When Taisetsu entered, the area he was in was a world of ice and snow. Because of the snowstorm, his vision was greatly limited. The low visibility made it difficult for Taisetsu to search for anything with his vision alone. As for the sound, in the snowstorm, the cries of different kinds of void original demons mixed together, sounding like the wails of hell. Taisetsu looked around. The snowstorm had completely covered the tracks on the ground, but logically speaking, it hadn't been long since Master Musashi released that void original demon into the bestial battle arena. It shouldn't have gone far. He began to run quickly on the snowy plains. Along the way, he didn't stop when he occasionally encountered void original demons that were causing trouble. Those that he could kill with one strike, he killed them and put them into his chinkuin bag. If he needed to fight with them for a while, he couldn't be bothered with them. He reckoned that he was still in the outer area. The void original demons here were generally things that could be killed with one strike, and that was before he used the Zhanlu sword. It wasn't until Taisetsu encountered the first void original demon that he needed to fight with 2 or 3 strikes that he felt that something was wrong. This bestial battle arena was clearly much bigger than he had imagined. That's not right. Even if this place is bigger than I thought, the frequency of me encountering small monsters is too low. Taisetsu recalled the scene when he was observing the bestial battle arena from above. At that time, he only felt that the void original demons were densely packed in the bestial battle arena. It didn't look so spacious and empty. This made Taisetsu calm down. If the number of small monsters in the area decreased, there were only 2 possibilities. They were all killed, or they moved to somewhere else. This snowstorm is really a hindrance. Taisetsu looked up and saw that the snowstorm was extremely vexing. Taisetsu was more or less a straightforward person. The simplest solution he could think of now was to get rid of the snowstorm. By how to get rid of it? The sword light soared into the sky and skyrocketed crazily. Then it slashed directly over the snowfield. Then the sword light condensed and finally returned to Das. The sky above the snowfield seemed to be torn open with a huge crack. The wind and snow squeezed directly to both sides. Light sprinkled from the crack, and the snowfield became clear. Taisetsu looked into the distance and instantly discovered the silhouettes of dozens of void original demons that had been hidden in the snowstorm. These void original demons were now scampering across the snowy plains and seemed to be heading in the same direction. He couldn't help but find it strange and immediately followed. As he moved forward, the snowstorm that had been split open was like flowing water and soon returned to its original state. Perhaps the weather here was constant, but fortunately, Taisetsu had already caught a void original demon that was moving in a certain direction, so he didn't have to break through the snowstorm again. Finally, some mournful cries became especially clear amidst the sound of the snowstorm. Taisetsu came to an ice valley and couldn't help but frown when he looked down. In the ice valley, hundreds of void original demons were gathered like ants, all heading in the same direction. And at the end of that direction was the bull-headed beetle that the King Hun had brought here and sent here by Master Musashi. For some reason, the void original demons that had gathered didn't attack each other. As if their only target was this bull-headed beetle, they attacked wildly and hoarsely, as if they couldn't wait to completely devour this void original demon. When Taisetsu had visited the Eternal Night Palace, Master Musashi had once said that these void original demons were especially obsessed with things that had souls. If it was a true soul, they would go even more berserk. They had almost no thoughts of their own, and only had an instinctive thirst for souls. They knew neither fear nor pain, and could fight until their deaths. Taisetsu had finally witnessed the terror of these void original demons. And now, under the siege of hundreds of void original demons, the bull-headed beetle was already riddled with wounds. It could only hang on bitterly and let out agonized cries continuously. This is... Just as the void original demon was continuously observing the bull-headed beetle, Taisetsu suddenly discovered that there was something embedded in the center of its abdomen. It was actually a bone flute the size of a palm. This was the tool that Yu Danxiang had used to control that void original demon that looked like a flying ant. Primal void devils would eat each other, but not all primal void devils were heading for the same target. The primal void devils in the Ice Valley were clearly here for the bull-headed beetle. This was their thirst for souls. At the very least, this bull-headed beetle original demon still had a remnant of soul. Could it be? Taisetsu's heart jumped, and he couldn't help but think of a certain ominous possibility. He instantly jumped down from the ice peak. He planned to study this bull-headed beetle original demon properly. But in the instant that he jumped down from the ice valley, something like a venomous snake tore through the air and wrapped itself around his leg. It was a black whip with flashing red patterns. One end of the whip wrapped around Taisetsu's calf. It then flung him viciously towards the top of the ice peak. Taisetsu's body smashed directly into the ice peak, causing the entire mountain to tremble. Large chunks of ice and snow crumbled one after another, and snow mist flew everywhere, causing the entire upper layer of the ice peak to seem to be wrapped in a layer of clouds. Taisetsu shook his somewhat dizzy head, broke out from under the pile of ice, and once again landed on a small platform that extended from the ice peak. He suddenly reached out with one hand and grabbed the whip that had ambushed him from behind and tightened his grip. Taisetsu exhaled slowly at this moment and said indifferently, "Looks like I'm really popular. King of Han, we meet again." The mist on the ice peak gradually dissipated, and the source of the whip that had penetrated deep into the icy mist also gradually became clear. Taisetsu narrowed his eyes and finally saw the figure of King of Han, Attila. This incomparably ruthless king had a strange smile on his face. I've already said that the area outside the residence is very dangerous. Newcomers shouldn't wander about. What's the matter with this void original demon that you sent over? Taisetsu couldn't be bothered to bicker with this fellow, and directly asked, "If you ask me to guess, I'll beat you up directly." "Then guess." The king of Hun didn't care at all. Taisetsu exhaled heavily at this moment, and in the instant that the king of Hun's face gradually became smug, his arms suddenly exerted strength, and in an instant he actually pulled the long whip and forcibly pulled the king of Hun's body. King of Hun's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly steadied his charging body. Unexpectedly, Taisetsu's figure leapt out from where he stood, and a huge crack instantly appeared on the ice peak due to the force of his leap. Taisetsu was already in front of the king of Hun, an arm's length away. Boom! A huge sound reverberated in the ice valley, so loud that it even caused the accumulated snow on the surrounding ice peaks to crumble. This was a fist that directly struck the king of Hun's chest. This punch actually caused the king of Hun's sternum to cave in directly into his body, and he spat out a mouthful of thick blood. Both his eyes were bloodshot, and his brain seemed to have exploded loudly. However, Taisetsu didn't stop there. He grabbed the whip in his hand and directly wrapped it around the king of Hun's body a few times, then raised the whip and began to swing wildly. The king of Hun was now like a stone tied to one end of a rope, and because of the centrifugal force, the entire whip became perfectly straight at this moment. Bang, 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 bang. Just like this, Taisetsu raised the whip and smashed the king of Hun in all directions. He seemed to have an inexhaustible physical strength, and directly smashed the surrounding ice peaks into smithereens before he stopped. Taisetsu still held the end of the whip in his hand. The whip naturally hung down, and the king of Hun, who was tied up by the whip, was now suspended in midair. All the bones in his body seemed to have been shattered, and it was difficult for him to maintain his original appearance. "Can you speak now?" Taisetsu looked down and asked, then shook the whip in his hand to release the end of the whip that bound Attila. At this moment, the king of Hun directly fell into the ice valley. The fallen Attila's 4 limbs, and even his neck seemed to be twisted. But the strange thing was his head suddenly twisted even more strangely, and then his body stiffly stood up straight. Those twisted limbs even made cracking sounds, and then returned to their original appearance. At this moment, Hun Nu swung his shoulders and looked up expressionlessly. "Your attack power is not bad, and your strength is enough. Looks like the Fushi throne barely accepts you." Taisetsu shook his head, and as he slowly descended, he said indifferently, "Guys like you who have just been beaten up all like to say such things. I thought you were more or less different." "Ah ha ha ha." At this moment, the Hun Emperor suddenly laughed out loud. "Newcomer, I like your arrogance. Tell this king your name." Attacking without a word. This king likes this kind of character. "I'm not gay, thank you." Taisetsu's first leader said, "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and say it, or else I'll beat you up again." King of Hun slowly floated over, looked at Taisetsu for a moment, and then said coldly, "It's nothing. This king only gave that trash in the square a piece of the void progenitor's brain matter. That guy accepted it gratefully. This king is really benevolent." "The progenitor's brain matter?" Taisetsu frowned, and subconsciously glanced at the oxhead beetle prime demon that was being wildly attacked. "What happens if a person eats this thing? Don't you already know?" King of Hun nodded with his chin. "It's just like everything you saw with your own eyes." Taisetsu was silent for a moment, and then asked in a low voice, "Can you Danxiang recover?" The Han Emperor laughed heartily. "Only humans have ever mutated into primordial demons, but humans who have become primordial demons have never recovered. However, maybe this trash has a chance? After all, this is this king's first time using prime demons. Oh, the progenitor's brain matter for an experiment. Maybe the results will be slightly different. That guy just wants to become stronger, that's all." Taisetsu sighed. "That's why he's trying so hard to please you. Forget it. This is his own choice. If he wants to blame someone, he can only blame his bad luck for running into you." King of Hun couldn't help but frown. "Why? You don't plan to help him get revenge?" "Not interested." Taisetsu shook his head, and looked at the ox-head beetle monster that was still struggling under the attacks of the primordial demons of the void. Can't you see, even after becoming like this, Yu Danxiang is still working hard. It wasn't easy for him to live, but he persevered, even though he's weak. But don't you think he should be respected? If I avenge him, it'll be an insult to his comeback. Even if it's revenge, he should be the one to do it himself. Let him do it himself. King of Hun seemed to have heard something very funny and couldn't help laughing maniacally. Based on this trash, this king is going to die of laughter. Not to mention that he was originally trash. Even if he really transformed into the progenitor of the void, do you think this king will be afraid of a mindless beast? Then let him become a mindless beast, Taisetsu said suddenly. King of Hun couldn't help but stare blankly at this moment, only to see Taisetsu suddenly rush toward the besieged ox-head beetle monster. King of Hun didn't know what Taisetsu wanted to do, but relying on his own strength, he waited quietly. Taisetsu approached above the head of the ox-head beetle monster. He stood on its head, and the ox-head beetle monster suddenly roared even more wildly. Yu Danxiang, Brother Chong, if you can hear me, be quiet. Taisetsu whispered at this time. I feel it. Maybe you don't understand, but I'm actually very sensitive to such strong things. After all, I'm also black. The wind and snow covered Taisetsu's voice, and King of Hun couldn't hear clearly for a moment. But miraculously, the ox-head beetle monster really quieted down at this time, even to the extent that it was a little strange. It actually allowed those void original demons to tear and bite its body without any resistance. This is the salary that my boss gave me when I worked at the Penglai treasure house last time. Taisetsu slowly took out a sheepskin scroll at this time and spread it open. My boss said that this is a one-time transaction contract. You just have to nod your head and it will fulfill your wish. Of course, the more you are willing to pay, the more you will get. The wind and snow suddenly stopped. King of Hun suddenly felt a sense of danger approaching. This was something that he hadn't encountered many times since he leveled up to the dimensional crevice. This strong sense of uneasiness even made King of Hun suddenly rush forward. He didn't care what Taisetsu wanted to do to the ox-head beetle monster. He only had one thought at this time, and that was to nip the danger in the bud. Herculean bull. Camel. The Hun emperor shouted. This king's incarnation. Crush this king's enemy. In the sky, following the Hun new king's loud call, two whirlpools suddenly appeared. A huge bull and a camel actually tore out from the whirlpool. Their size was so huge that they directly surpassed the body of the bull-headed beetle. This is my first time doing business. Don't get in the way. Scram. Honest people would probably get angry too. Taisetsu coldly snorted and reached out to take the Zhanlu's sword from his neck. Heavenly sword. A huge 100-meter-long sword light fell from the sky and instantly killed the mountain-sized Herculean bull and camel. After the two huge incarnations were instantly killed, King of Hun was stunned and spat out a mouthful of blood. His blood dyed the sky red, and his entire body slowly fell to the ground like a frosted eggplant. Oomph. Do you think the name of my foeman, Ao, Litun, Nu, Dongfeng, Double Flower Red Rod, is fake? Chapter 1485. Yu Danxiang. Yu Danxiang, are you hiding here to read comics again? Have you finished your homework? Your homeroom teacher called me just now and said you fought with your classmates again. Are you tired of living? Do you know how hard it is for us to pay for your education? Don't call me Yu Danxiang. My name is Wang Xiaohu. I'm the leader of the Dragon and Tiger sect. I'll beat you, you old witch. Bah, you little bastard, do you want to die? Your dad is just a useless fishball seller. You little bastard, if not Yu Danxiang, what are you called? You dare to be stubborn with me? You've grown up, haven't you? I'll beat you to death, you little bastard. Who told you not to call me Mom? You're not my mom. You're not my mom. My mom died a long time ago. You bad woman, let go of me. Let go of me. Ouch. Did you quarrel with your mom again? Let me see, where did you hit? Does it still hurt? Don't keep quiet. I came to see while your mom was bathing. I have to go back soon. Here's some food. Eat it quickly. You must have been hungry for the whole night. Don't worry about me. Go away. You liar. My mother just left, and you found an evil woman to beat me up. Go away. Go away. Sigh. Remember to eat. Bang. I don't want your stinky fish balls. You're a dead fish ball seller. You're useless. Little bastard, this is for you. We have nothing to do with each other in the future. Don't say, I'm unreasonable. I've been married to your old bastard for so long. I sleep with him every day. It's only right that I take these big fish balls. If you're unhappy and take it to court, I'll still be in the right. Don't be so shameless. Bitch, my dad is still lying in the funeral home. You're in such a hurry to run away with a man. Aren't you afraid that he'll come back for you on the 7th day of your death? Go away. If this old bastard dares to come, I'll slap him. Or he's a good-for-nothing who can't even afford grave. You dare to attack? Come at me if you dare. Little bastard, I'm useless. I can't even beat that bitch. Are you going to make fun of me? The man in the coffin looked normal, as if he had fallen asleep. Wearing a junior high school uniform, he leaned on the side, burning comics instead of Creek money. He remembered that the man in the coffin liked to take him to read these comics when he was young. The man said, "You have to learn to be strong." The man said, "Be a man of indomitable spirit and help the weak." The man said, "It doesn't matter if others look down on you. The important thing is that you can't look down on yourself. You have to be like Wang Xiaohu here. Do you remember the 3 instructions here?" When he reached this page, he stopped. Kneeling in front of the brazier, he read with a sobbing voice. You can't go back on your word. You can't do evil. You can't go whoring, gambling, drinking, and boasting. It's all bullshit. Only by killing and arson could one become strong. I don't want to be Yudan Xiang. I want to be the strongest one. The flames in the brazier suddenly flared up and burned everything to ashes. You haven't graduated from high school. You should at least study a technical school, right? If there's no technical school, it's hard for us to hire you. Why don't you go next door? Manager, give me a chance. I'll study hard. I'm willing to do anything. I'm not afraid of being tired. Go. The economy is not good. We can't afford to hire you. Awa, don't go, please don't go. I can't live without you. Awa, stay, I'll treat you better. Give me some time. I'll make money. I'll make a lot of money. Give you time. Who gives me time? Chong, I can't wait. Sorry, a woman's youth is limited. If you can make money in the future, find a young and beautiful woman and forget about me. Awa, don't go, Awa. Awa. He chased her on the road, crying and shouting, hitting the window of the car that he couldn't catch up with. The woman in the car just turned her face away. Finally, he ran out of strength and lay on the road under the heavy rain. Hey, Yudan Xiang, give me 10 yuan of fish balls. I've searched everywhere, but your fish balls are the best. Of course, this is a secret recipe passed down from generation to generation. You can't find a second place in the world. Haha, of course. Then, Brother Chong, I wish your business prosperity and better. Thank you. Thank you. Old man, I'm back to sell fish balls just like you. Am I useless? However, he didn't seem to be out of practice. Yudan Xiang, where did you hide the biggest fish ball? If I can't find it today, I won't give you any money. Brother Xiaosheng, please let me go. My business is small. Where's the biggest fish ball? I already said that I don't have it. Can you stop looking for it? You've already turned my whole pot of fish balls into mush. Ah, I found it. You said you don't have it. I knew you were up to no good, bastard. Can you give me some face, Brother Xiaosheng? Don't be so loud. There are other customers. Aren't you shameless? What are you afraid of? Aha. Brother Xiaosheng tells you, shameless people live long. Like you can live a long life like an old dog. Brother Xiaosheng, the fish balls are getting better and better, but the people are getting worse and worse. Aha. I like you more and more shameless. You'd better keep selling fish balls here. I'm not happy to eat at other places. Come on. I'm happy today. I'll give you a tip. Thank you, Brother Xiaosheng. Thank you. You're really like an old dog, aha. Yes, you're really like an old dog. You came here to open a stall, and you're going to be an old dog in his 40s. But people are like this. If there's no chance, there's no chance, right? So painful. His body was like being crushed into mud. The pain was indescribable. It was like being imprisoned in a dark space. Yudan Xiang was in pain. He had a dream, dreaming that he had become a huge monster and there were other huge monsters around him. These monsters were crazily biting him. He struggled to resist, and he tore every monster that bit him. He felt that every time he tore a monster, he would become stronger and stronger. But there were too many monsters in front of him, too many. It was like going back to the past. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how hard he fought, he would still fail in the end. There were many examples of the success of those grassroots civilians, but none of them could be replicated. There were too many people in the world. The population was exploding. Even the survivorship deviation value was multiplied many times by this huge base. Sure enough, I'm the protagonist. I can turn the tables, I can win, and so on. It's all just an illusion. No matter how hard I try, the resources have long been squeezed to death by the people at the top. Give up. Just give up. Death is the end of everything. Naturally, there will be no worries after death. Give up. Yu Danxiang gradually closed his eyes, unwilling to move. He couldn't move. He was too tired. Life was too tiring. It was really too tiring. Dad, I'm very useless. I'm already in my 30s. Dad, I'm really tired. I can't hold on anymore. In the Colosseum of the Eternal Night Palace, in the ice and snow area, Daz held the Zhanlu sword in his hand and stopped. He directly killed the two clones of Attila, the Han Emperor, with one sword. After slashing Attila, the Han Emperor, down, he did not continue to pursue. At this moment, Taisetsu frowned as he looked at the raised parchment scroll. He looked at the motionless bullhead beetle void, original demon, and gradually had an ominous feeling. There was no sign of a deal on the parchment scroll. This was Taisetsu's first time learning how to make a deal. It wasn't that he hadn't done it before. Black Soul number 18 had brought him to do it once, but at that time, Taisetsu had been watching from the side. He wasn't sure if it was because the deal still needed some time, or because Yu Danxiang didn't choose this deal in the end, or what Yu Danxiang wanted and what he could give were completely different, so he couldn't violate the one-time contract given to him by Boss Luo. Time passed slowly. This bullhead beetle void, original demon, didn't only close its eyes, but also its limbs gradually became weak. It knelt on the ground bit by bit, and finally its whole body lay on the ground. The surrounding primordial void devils swarmed over and tore at its flesh. It was a startling sight. Taisetsu opened his mouth, looked at the scene in front of him, and finally sighed. Yu Danxiang, Brother Chong, is this the only way? You forgot what you said. Taisetsu shook his head. In fact, he understood from the beginning that Yu Danxiang had become like this and lost his mind, even if he kept his soul. But in the situation where he lost his mind, how could he clearly express what he wanted to do? After all, this was only a one-time deal and not Boss Luo coming in person to make the deal choice flexibly and freely. Haha, looks like you've wasted your efforts. At this moment, wild laughter that seemed to cover the sky and cover the earth resounded from all directions. Taisetsu frowned and turned around, only to see a figure flying rapidly from below. It was King of Hun, Attila, who had been struck down by him not long ago. At this time, Attila's injuries seemed to have healed, and apart from some tattered clothes, he looked fine. You're really lucky. Taisetsu snorted. When he looked at the bull-headed beetle void, original demon again, there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. King of Hun, Attila snorted. After this king killed a god, this king has 10 avatars. Although that strike of yours was powerful, it's still too early for you to kill this king. Taisetsu shook his head. It's really unfair. A guy like you actually has a better life than Yu Danxiang. King of Hun couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. He said mockingly, I say, you're still a powerhouse who ascended from the lower realm. Can't you see through the logic of fairness and unfairness? Even if this king is mediocre, this king is of noble birth. Since birth, this king has achievements that others can't achieve even if they work hard. So what? This is this king's fate. Besides, if this king really didn't have any ability, how could this king have achieved what he has today? Why? The efforts of ordinary people are precious, But the efforts of God's favored children are naturally worthless in your eyes? Taisetsu dug his ears and said, "Sorry, I'm originally a commoner. I used to hate the rich. Now, I'm going to have double standards for you. Come and bite me." King of Hun Attila's face suddenly stiffened. It wasn't that he hadn't seen shameless people before. Among the transcendents, there were many shameless people. However, he had never seen someone like Taisetsu who directly said it out loud. King of Hun Attila took a deep breath, but suddenly shook his head. He glanced at the bull-headed beetle monster that had fallen to the ground. Almost half of its body had been bitten by the void original demons. He suddenly laughed and said, "I originally wanted to see if this trash would have any special changes after eating the brain of the ancestor. But it seems that trash is trash. Even if given a chance, it still can't soar to the sky." Taisetsu slightly narrowed his eyes. He didn't say anything, but only raised the Jean-Lou's sword at an angle. King of Han Attila chuckled, shook his head, and said, "Newcomer, I admit your strength. However, I don't think that we need to fight to the death. You see, this trash is just like this. Since it's already a foregone conclusion, why should we hold on to it? As an expert in the Ascension Gap, you should understand that there is no unresolvable hatred between experts. Our ultimate goal is to solve the mystery of the gap and enter the primordial. Why should we make things difficult for ourselves here? Sorry, I'm very vengeful," Taisetsu said coldly. King of Han Attila snorted coldly. "You're just a newcomer. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're recognized by the Fushi throne? Today, I'll let you know that even if you're powerful in your original subworld, you'll still have to obediently kneel down in front of me here." Taisetsu Attila didn't intend to continue arguing with him. He waved the Jean-Lou's sword in his hand. The source of the foreign body in his body started to move crazily. He was still in his humanoid form, so most of his strength was still hidden. The Jean-Lou's sword had the club symbol, so he needed to use his black soul body to unleash his full strength. At the same time, King of Hun Attila's ferocious nature was also aroused. Behind him, 10 huge whirlpools floated. There were different shadows in each whirlpool. "I'm not afraid to tell you the name of the god that I tainted with blood sacrifice." King of Han Attila opened his hand and said, "The Persian military god." Taisetsu sneered. He raised his sword, and the Jean-Lou's sword shot towards the sky. He didn't even have the mood to wait for the King of Han Attila to make his move. Why would he announce the name of his move when fighting? Idiot. However, at this moment, Taisetsu Attila's hand suddenly trembled. First rule, don't betray me. Chapter 1486. First rule, don't go back on your word. When this voice rang out in the Ice Valley, Taisetsu's slightly tense face suddenly broke into a smile, and the Jean-Lou's sword that was raised high in the air slowly descended. In contrast to Taisetsu's gradually relaxed expression, King Hun Attila frowned slightly. He naturally recognized this voice, and it was precisely because he recognized it that he was slightly surprised. This trash, actually, they looked at the bull-headed beetle-like primordial demon at the bottom of the Ice Valley at almost the same time. Looking at it now, this primordial demon of the void was still being eaten by other primordial demons of the void. Its current appearance was even like a shark that had been corroded by microorganisms at the bottom of the sea. Bones could even be seen in many places, and it was a horrible sight to behold. But second rule, don't commit crimes. The voice rang out in the Ice Valley once again, and this time it seemed to have become even deeper, clearer, stronger, and more powerful, and it reverberated. Trying to be mysterious. King Hun snorted coldly and waved his hand. One of the 10 huge whirlpools behind him suddenly shone brightly, and he shouted coldly, "Wild boar, charge!" Within that huge whirlpool, the shadow of a huge wild boar that was as big as a mountain struggled out. The wild boar shadow roared and crashed directly into the bull-headed beetle-like primordial demon of the void at the bottom of the Ice Valley. Seeing this, Taisetsu naturally didn't stay idle. He swung the Jean-Lou's sword downwards, and another 100-meter-long sword light pierced down from the sky. But this time, Attila was already prepared and ordered the wild boar, to stop in midair. The huge sword light pierced into the ice valley like a huge wall, blocking the wild boar shadow and the bull-headed beetle-like primordial demon of the void. You dare to block this king? The King Hun's eyes shone with an ominous glint. Taisetsu ignored King Hun's glare and stood on top of the giant sword light, holding his sword. To be honest, the first time I met you, I wanted to beat you up. But my boss is a good person, so I'm a good person too, so I won't hit people casually. So when I met you the second time, I held myself back. The less trouble, the better. But the third time, you still jumped out. This is your fault. I want to ask, how am I in your way? Fine, I won't argue with you for the third time. Because I'm a good person with a family. If I can avoid fighting, I won't. But you still want to fight now, so don't blame me. This time, I have a legitimate reason. This guy is now my client. My boss said that if anyone dares to touch our client, then we don't have to be polite anymore. Who knew if Boss Luo had said that? Are you sure you want to stop me? The King Hun took a step forward, and the 10 vortexes behind him began to stir, their ferocity soaring to the heavens. F*CK. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't want to fight, then stand still. Taisetsu snorted coldly. Talking to you makes me angry. Don't think that I don't have a temper after cultivating for so many years. I used to be in the underworld too. When I cut people up, even I was scared of myself. Ha! I've met many arrogant guys, but someone like you is really the first. You. While the King Hun was talking, a huge sword slashed down from the sky, not giving him a chance to finish his sentence. This sword slashed right into the King Hun's chest from high up in the sky. Luckily, it didn't split his chest in half, if not for the warning ability of one of the 10 incarnations, causing him to retreat a little. The consequences would have been unthinkable. King Attila looked at the second sword light that appeared in the ice valley with some apprehension, feeling as if he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The first sword slash didn't dissipate and stood there as if it was solid. The second sword slash also appeared at his command. What was this newcomer's background? Don't talk, just stand there. Taisetsu regained some of his temper when he was in the underworld. If you move again, I'll chop you to death. No, if it wasn't for the fact that I want to wait for you, Danxiang, to chop you up, I'll chop you to death now. The King Hun was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. When had he ever been insulted like this? He was a peerless villain who fought in all directions in his own world, trampled on countless races, and even sacrificed more than half of his people to pollute the gods. He held the 10 incarnations of the god that he had seized. Although he wasn't the top in the Transcendence organization, he wasn't a good person either. He just liked to abuse people for fun. He was just a piece of trash that was unfortunately caught in the cracks. How could he expect to meet a guy like Taisetsu, who was so reckless when he was unreasonable? This piece of trash. Even if he was several times stronger, he's still trash. The King Hun roared. Why fed him was only the brain matter of the ancestor. At most, he'll mutate into the ancestor of the void. I've killed at least 80 of the ancestors of the void. There's no need to wait for this piece of trash to wake up. I'll teach you what fear is first. This time, it wasn't the sword light of the heavenly sword that came down from the sky. This time, it was a huge sword light that was like a panel directly whipping toward the King Hun's body. This sword light was over 100 meters long, so the width of the sword blade could be imagined. This huge sword blade slamming towards Hun New King made it impossible for him to dodge. He could only brace himself and use one of his incarnations to block it, and only then was he able to block it. But when the incarnation blocked it, it was already dispirited and listless. You shameless guy. How can you use a sword like that? Are you still a swordsman? The King Hun couldn't help but curse. He had never seen anyone use a big sword like a door panel. When did I say I was a swordsman? When I used to fight, I always used whatever was convenient for me. Why did I have to hack it when it was convenient for me? Are you an idiot? All right, now let's switch. The King Hun frowned at this moment. There were already strange changes in the Ice Valley. The original Void Demon, in the form of a bull-headed beetle, was actually splitting a large number of blood strands out of its body. These blood threads entangled the surrounding original void demons one by one, and then pulled madly towards the bullhead beetle original devil. Within the ice gorge, hundreds of original void demons were tightly connected to the bullhead beetle original devil's body. Because of these blood threads, these primordial void devils looked like they had been crudely twisted into pillars at this moment. Then, a blood membrane enveloped all the primordial void devils, transforming them into a gigantic blood-colored cocoon. The cocoon was currently beating madly like a heart. That heartbeat sound was now reverberating in the ice valley. It was so dense that it was like the beating of a drum, and even made one feel breathless. Taisetsu once again returned to the sword light of the first giant sword. Hugging the sword, he stood and silently watched this scene. The King Hun had suffered one loss after another. For a moment, he didn't dare to act rashly, but the anger in his heart rose instead of subsiding. However, he calmed down. His eyes were like that of a venomous snake, sizing up all this, as if he was waiting for something. Finally, this blood-colored cocoon's beating seemed to have reached a limit. The thing inside seemed to be about to appear at any time. Right at this moment, the King Hun suddenly laughed coldly. White Horse. One of the 10 great whirlpools no longer showed a huge shadow. Instead, a huge light pillar shot out directly from this whirlpool. The light pillar had an extremely high temperature. The moment it appeared, it had already melted the surrounding ice peaks. It directly shot towards this blood-colored cocoon and pierced through it. The terrifying heat directly scorched the large cocoon's wound. It was like a heart that had been pierced. A large amount of dark green liquid gushed out from the wound. The large cocoon jumped a few times at this moment, and then collapsed with a loud crash. There was no more movement. Ha ha! The King Hun laughed maniacally. Trash will always be trash. Even if I give trash a chance, it's still trash. Newbie, I've had enough today. I'll find you another day. He turned and left, overflowing with pride. Third rule, don't go whoring, gambling, drinking, and blowing. The voice echoed in the ice valley for the third time. This time, it was stronger and more forceful. This time, it was even clearer, as if the voice was right next to the ear. What? The King Hun's expression changed slightly. He turned around abruptly and stared fixedly at the mass that had already turned into blood and mud, but he couldn't see anything. This was just like a swamp formed from rotten flesh and blood. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Attila the Hun. Soon after, Attila the Hun only felt a huge force smashing into his chest. The huge force sent his body flying, crashing into an ice peak. He actually crashed right through this ice peak. King Attila felt a wave of dizziness in his head. Before he could recover from the inertia of flying backwards, the black shadow approached him again and started to crazily attack his entire body, sending him straight to the bottom of the ice valley. A beast-like roar came from the black shadow. King Attila was directly pressed onto the snowy ground and beaten up crazily, and the snowy ground, layer by layer, cracked and caved in due to the strength of the attacks. The appearance of the black shadow gradually became clearer. It was a monster that stood upright. It didn't look like a human, nor a ghost. Its entire body was covered in barbs and scales. Its arms were huge, its teeth were sharp, and its head was like a lizard's. Finally, the monster stopped attacking King Attila. Instead, it grabbed King Attila's neck with both hands and lifted him up high. You trash. King Attila grabbed the monster's arms with both hands and showed a pained expression, but his expression became even more ferocious. How dare you? How dare you? The monster ignored him and only roared at the sky. Right at this moment, one of the 10 giant whirlpools summoned by the King Hun finally activated. This time, it was the shadow of a human warrior holding a golden sword. Even so, the shadow of the human warrior holding the golden sword was at least 20 meters tall. The golden sword slashed directly at the monster, but the scales on the monster's body were extremely hard. This slash only sent the monster flying. The Han Emperor obtained a chance to escape, and at this moment, his ferocious nature was completely unleashed. He snatched the golden sword from the hands of the human warrior, and at the same time summoned the sword of light formed by the white horse. With one on the left and one on the right, he directly combined them and unleashed a killing blow towards the monster. The light swallowed the monster in an instant. When the light dissipated, more than half of the ice valley had been destroyed. The snow had melted to reveal the surface of the rocks, and the surroundings looked like flowing lava from a volcano. Taisetsu glanced at the King Hun's destructive power and couldn't help but smack his lips. This old fellow is quite powerful. Looks like I'll have to slash a few more times. The key is these clones. He couldn't help but look up at the 10 giant whirlpools in the sky. From just now, there were a few clones that appeared consecutively. Male bull, camel, wild boar, white horse, golden sword warrior. He didn't seem to care about the monster that was swallowed by the light at all. He only reached out his hand and grabbed the goatskin scroll, then slowly rolled it up. At the same time, on the ground, the King Hun was holding a sword of light that shone like the sun. The ferocious look on his face disappeared and was replaced by silence. He was looking straight ahead. In front of him, the monster covered in scales stood motionless. Its entire body had turned into black charcoal under the high temperature, and it looked like an ugly lump. Crack. At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared on the body of the carbonized monster. Following the appearance of the first crack, a large number of cracks appeared on the carbonized monster's body. Black light shone out from the cracks, followed by a powerful shockwave that spread out in all directions from monster. The heat wave rushed to the distant ice peak, melting the ice and filling the surroundings with mist. Oomph! In the white mist, King Arati snorted coldly. Wind! A tornado came down from the sky, blowing away the white mist around them. In the strong wind, there was an unshakable figure standing on the exposed rock stratum. It was Yudanxiang. However, it seemed to be different from Yudanxiang. It only had a similar appearance to Yudanxiang, or rather, it looked younger than Yudanxiang. Fine black hair grew all over its body, and its hands were more like the claws of a wild beast. Its exposed upper body had distinct muscles that seemed to contain terrifying power. On its back, there was a pair of black bat wings. Its hair was disheveled and draped over its back. On its head, there was a pair of gray horns that looked very much like the horns of the bull-headed beetle, the void original demon. Finally, it slowly opened its eyes. Its eyes were completely black, without pupils or sclera. Seeing Yudanxiang's new appearance, Taisetsu could not help but open his mouth in surprise. He could not figure out what Yudanxiang had become. He subconsciously glanced at the sheepskin scroll in his hand. I haven't read enough books, so I can't understand what's written on it. This isn't Chinese at all. What kind of language is this? Bad review. You trash. At this moment, the King of Hun snorted coldly and raised the destructive lightsaber in his hand. At the same time, he suddenly moved. It was silent, impossible to catch, and as fast as light. The moment the King of Hun's lightsaber slashed down, its hands, its claws had already pierced directly into the King of Hun's chest. It was torn apart. Chapter 1487. Daz could vaguely see Fish Ball Chong's expression on its face. The main reason was that its hair volume had broken through the sky at this moment. Daz couldn't help but feel gratified. As for this guy's gaze at this moment, Daz had subconsciously ignored it. There was an unprecedented ferocity in his dark eyes, but Taisetsu did not care. Instead, he extended his finger and pointed behind him. He left the mouth with sharp teeth and turned slightly and dodged at the same time. A beam of light shot towards him. The light came from the 10 vortexes in the sky. The King Hun had been stabbed in the chest and torn apart, but the 10 vortexes in the sky did not disappear because of that. Attila, the King Hun, was not really dead. The King Hun who had stolen the power of the gods in the original subworld had 10 incarnations. This was equivalent to comparing the King Hun to other people. Apart from the original body, the King Hun also had 10 incarnations. To kill him, one would need to kill him at least 11 times. This was also why the King Hun could still jump around in the organization of transcendence despite his vile personality. However, the King Hun's two incarnations, Herculean Bull and Camel, had been directly destroyed by Taisetsu. Later on, his original body was directly torn apart. Now, in the 10 vortexes, there were at most 8 incarnations left. His power could no longer reach its peak state, and it would be difficult for him to recover. His power, after this, had been directly knocked down by a level. Just like the super beings in these cracks, losing external objects was not an unresolvable hatred. But when one's power was damaged to such an extent, it was not something that could be skipped by a simple mediation. Trash will always be trash. The King Hun's figure was nowhere to be seen, and only his voice could be heard. It was coming from the 10 vortexes at once, but it was uneven. Clearly, the King Hun could not even maintain the unity of his incarnations at the moment. His rage had reached an unimaginable level. Taisetsu could not be bothered with the King Hun's stubbornness. With a wave of his hand, the two materialized giant swords of light shattered and dispersed, before he found a place with good scenery and sat down. Yu Danxiang, or rather, it was born from hundreds of primordial void demons, and was now extraordinarily dangerous. Still, Taisetsu had cut down so many primordial void demons, and none of them gave him such a sense of danger. What did he actually buy? Taisetsu could not help complaining, shaking his head as he glanced at the parchment scroll. Can the boss really understand this thing? On the other hand, the King Hun did not really attack Taisetsu despite his rage. The newcomer of the organization was clearly at the level of a senior member. Such newcomers had only appeared once or twice in history, and he had been careless this time. On the other hand, Yu Danxiang, the valiant and prideful King Hun, was unwilling to admit that a piece of trash that he had played as he pleased could now stand against him. Trash! I'll break all your bones and fix you with steel needles, turning you into a specimen. This king, I'll torture you for 1,000 years. The 10 whirlpools started to spin crazily, except for the whirlpools of the dead, Herculean Bull and Camel, which were slightly dim. The other 8 whirlpools were filled with lightning and thunder, as if they were brewing a terrifying power. At this moment, in the face of the 10 great whirlpools' abnormalities, it slowly raised its head, its pitch-black eyes sizing up these whirlpools without a trace of fear on its face. Suddenly, the wings on its back spread open abruptly, and it soared into the sky. It actually crashed headfirst into one of the whirlpools. After crashing into the whirlpool, it seemed to be swallowed, just like that. Only the whirlpool continued to spin rapidly. The King Hun laughed wantonly, mocking its stupidity. Trash! Trash! As expected, even after obtaining power, you're still trash. You actually dared to crash into this king's. The whirlpool that it had crashed into suddenly stopped spinning. Then, under the Hun King's startled cry, it actually started spinning in the opposite direction. What? Not only did the whirlpool spin in the opposite direction, it even started to expand crazily. It seemed that there was something inside the whirlpool that was going to burst open. The King Hun even showed a trace of fear when the whirlpool started to expand. Bang! Finally, the whirlpool expanded to its limit and directly broke apart. At this moment, it was floating in the air, and its hands were grabbing onto a white horse's shadow. It actually directly bit onto the white horse's neck, biting and devouring the phantom of the white horse bit by bit. It was like a primitive man drinking raw meat. The scene was so bloody and violent. In just a moment, the phantom of the white horse was completely swallowed by it. At this moment, it opened its mouth, revealing a ferocious smile. Its pitch-black eyes turned and directly looked at another whirlpool. It flapped its wings and directly rushed into another whirlpool. No, 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 no. It wasn't until it crashed into the second whirlpool that the King Hun hurriedly screamed in horror. Unfortunately, it was too late. The whirlpool spun in the opposite direction again, expanded, and burst open. At this time, it directly pulled out a phantom of the white horse, grabbed it in its hand, and crazily bit and swallowed it. And this time, the phantom that was caught was a phoenix. Trash! I'm going to kill you. Seeing that more than half of the phoenix was swallowed in an instant, the King Hun screamed, and the remaining 8 whirlpools crazily shot out thunderbolts, converging into a huge thunderbolt net, directly covering the King Hun. Being disturbed by its meal, the King Hun suddenly became angry and opened its mouth to spit out a piece of the phoenix's phantom. Then it stretched out its black arms, directly grabbed the thunderbolt net, and directly tore it apart. Then, with a roar, it crashed into the 3rd whirlpool again. Don't come over. Don't come over. Right now, the Hun Emperor's voice was completely different from the majestic voice that shook the heavens and earth at the beginning. It was clearly much weaker. Even his confidence was no longer sufficient. His voice was trembling, and there was even a trace of fear in it. This time, what it caught was the phantom of the human warrior with the golden sword. It directly bit through the neck and then swallowed it in big mouthfuls. The King Hun, who had successively killed 5 of the white horse's incarnations and the King Hun's original body, was directly beaten down by several levels. At this time, he was even weaker than the ultimate masters of the subworlds. He was unprecedentedly weak. He no longer went crazy because of anger, nor did he shout anything. The remaining whirlpools quickly converged and turned into a black light ball, shooting directly toward the exit of the Colosseum. Seeing that its food was about to escape, it screamed, and its body suddenly spun. As it spun, it set off a sharp tornado accompanied by blue-purple lightning. Nine Sun's Thunderbolt Wild Dragon Drill. At this moment, the Yu Danxiang's voice sounded again. The moment he heard this voice, Taisetsu almost slid down from the big rock he was sitting on. With a strange expression, he muttered to himself, Hey, the style. Pay attention to the style. But he didn't care about the style. The sharp tornado accompanied by the lightning rushed directly toward the escaping black light ball, catching up and breaking it. Trash! I won't let you go. I'm the King Hun. La! The King Hun let out an extremely shrill scream. And at the same time, the huge destructive power directly destroyed more than half of the Colosseum's ice field. After a long time, when everything calmed down, Daz slowly flew toward the depths of the ice field with only rocks left. When he landed, he saw that it was sitting cross-legged on a gray-brown rock. It was biting and devouring the incarnation phantasm of King Hun. As for what the original face of this phantasm was, it couldn't be seen clearly at this moment. It didn't care about Taisetsu's arrival, and it ate the incarnation bit by bit. Finally, it stood up and jumped down from the rock. Its pitch-black eyes sized up Taisetsu in front of it. Taisetsu frowned and asked tentatively, You Danxiang, Brother Chong? It didn't move at all and just stared straight at him. Taisetsu pondered for a moment and then moved closer, but he felt more danger, so he secretly held the Zhanlu sword's hilt and was always on guard. You should taste very good. I want to eat you, it said slowly. Finally, it opened its mouth and said. It was indeed Fish Egg Chong's voice, but it was clearly not Fish Egg Chong's tone. I'm not as easy to eat as the King Hun. Taisetsu stopped and said calmly, You're not Yu Danxiang. He's inside me, it said slowly. I was born because of his strong will, and I'm something he wants to be. So, although you smell very good, I won't eat you. Moreover, it's very difficult for me to eat you now. You're more powerful than the King Hun. Thank you very much. Taisetsu narrowed his eyes. However, you actually use things to describe yourself. So what are you? Void original devil? Human? Or? It shook its head. I don't know either. I only know that I'm very powerful now, and I'll become even more powerful in the future. Other than you, there are many other delicious things here. If I eat them, I'll become even more powerful. Taisetsu frowned, thinking that this guy was talking about the other Void original devils in the arena. So he said calmly, That won't do. The Void original devils here are the materials I'm going to fight for. I won't just give it to you. It suddenly fell silent. After a moment of silence, it nodded and said, All right, I'll give it to you. I'll look for food elsewhere. Taisetsu opened his mouth in shock. This guy was actually so easy to talk to. Although I won't eat you, it suddenly said, but I hope that you won't appear again. Otherwise, I'll still eat you. After saying that, it spread its black wings, flapped, and flew into the air. Seeing that it was about to leave, Taisetsu couldn't help but shout, "Wait!" "Thank you." Its voice came. "Also, I'm Wang Xiao. This is the name he wants." Wang Xiao. Taisetsu opened his mouth, watching it fly far away in a flash, and finally shook his head. "Brother Chong, we'll meet again someday." An illusory figure was staggering within the Eternal Night Palace. He would occasionally turn his head to look behind him, and his face was filled with fear. This was the appearance of a handsome young man. Suddenly, the young man stopped in his tracks, and his face was filled with vigilance. But when the young man saw that the person standing in front of him was a charming man wearing a bright red robe, his vigilance relaxed a little, but he didn't relax too much. "It's you, Lord Long Yong?" "Aya, isn't this King Attila?" The man in red. Long Yang Jun walked over leisurely at this moment, his charming voice softening people's hearts. Probably ignoring his personality, he was really a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. This youth was Attila, the Hun Emperor. More accurately speaking, this was the youth of his 10 incarnations, and was also the only incarnation that had survived this calamity. 9 of his 10 incarnations were gone, and even his main body had been torn apart. It was easy to imagine how desolate the Hun Emperor, who was once the pride of the heavens, was right now. "Long Yang Jun, don't block the way. I don't have time to deal with you." King Hun was no longer as reckless as before, but his tone was still tough. "King Attila, you're really a heartless man," Long Yang Jun said sadly. "If I didn't save you just now, I'm afraid that you wouldn't even be able to keep this young man incarnation." "What?" King Hun couldn't help but be startled. Thinking back to the last moment, it seemed that there was a mysterious force that pulled him, and that was why the young man incarnation wasn't caught by that trash, that monster. "Long Yang Jun, why did you save me?" The young man incarnation of the King Hun frowned at this moment. Long Yang Jun covered his mouth and smiled, looking at the young man incarnation with a pair of peach blossoms. "Aya, what a beautiful young man. What cute child." The young man incarnation suddenly clamped his legs together, and his whole body shivered. He hurriedly said, "Long Yang Jun, thank you for saving me. I'll definitely repay this kindness tenfold in the future." "King Attila, it's true that I like beauties, but—" Long Yang Jun narrowed his eyes. "Once I think that this young man incarnation is a vulgar man like you, I can't help but want to vomit. Why would I want to have a long talk with you? It's good that it's not like this." The young man incarnation secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and then he frowned again. "Then why did you save me?" "Of course, it's because there are benefits to saving you." Long Yang Jun chuckled. "King Attila, since you're safe now, I'll take this benefit." The young man incarnation frowned, and with a thought, he already knew what the benefit Long Yang Jun was talking about was. He sighed in his heart. It seemed that he had to give up some benefits, so he reluctantly took out a throne emblem and threw it out. "Here you go. I know why you saved me. You saved me, and I'll write it off." Long Yang Jun stretched out his hand and took the throne emblem into his hand. He chuckled. "In that case, I'll kindly accept it. King Attila, you're really unique." "Aya, I'm a little reluctant to do it." Long Yang Jun. The King of Hun acutely sensed the murderous intent in Long Yang Jun's words, and his expression changed slightly. "I've already given you the benefits. Long Yang Jun, don't push your luck. After all, I was asked to do it." Long Yang Jun smiled, and the sword hanging at his waist was already out of its sheath. "I'm sorry, King Attila." Unsheathing, sheathing. He didn't even move a step, and a small sword mark appeared on the neck of the young man incarnation in front of him, and then the head rolled down. "It's a pity that you have such a pretty face." Long Yang Jun took out a handkerchief to cover his hand and picked up the young man's head. Then he knocked on the forehead of the young man with his finger, and the head actually shattered. In the end, all that was left was a grayish ball of light. Lord Long Yang chuckled, pinched his fingers together, and drew a line in the air. Immediately, a human-sized crack appeared beside him. It was a passage leading to a certain subworld. Musashi said that you'll never be able to rise again. Long Yang Jun said softly, King Attila, since we're acquaintances, I'll send you to a good family. You have to be strong. He threw the ball of light into the passage, and then he disappeared from the corridor of the Eternal Night Palace. A certain subworld, doomsday civilization, survivor base, hospital delivery room. A man anxiously paced back and forth outside the delivery room. Finally, the doctor came out. Congratulations, General, it's a daughter. What? The man was furious when he heard that. During the examination, it was clearly said that it was a boy. General? The man snorted coldly. Raise her first. The commander of the Eastern Base likes young girls. We can exchange for more food. Here, there's no extra food to raise trash. Understood. The doctor hurriedly nodded, but in his heart, he could only sigh for the little life that was just born. What a pitiful little fellow. She was just born into this world, and her fate was already decided. At least, change her name, General. The doctor sighed. After all, you're her father. Let's call her Attila. After that, the general left. Chapter 1488. After it left the Colosseum, it went straight to the Eternal Night Palace. It followed the path and soon came to the stone house outside the square. Yu Danxiang and Wang Xiaohu silently walked into the stone house and sat down alone. After an unknown amount of time, it slowly raised its head and looked at the door of the stone house. It saw a figure leaning against the door beam at an unknown time. There were two katanas, one long and one short, on his waist, and a wine cup in his hand. He looked frivolous. Master Musashi. Master Musashi looked at it directly, but didn't say anything. After a while, Master Musashi suddenly said, Should I call you Danxiang or Wang Xiao? It frowned, but still didn't say anything. Master Wu Chong shook his head and said, In any case, I am the current guardian of the Eternal Night Palace. Whatever happens inside, I more or less know, and you can just treat it as the middle-aged uncle's voyeuristic desire causing mischief. It finally couldn't help but say after a long silence, Wang Xiaohu. Master Musashi nodded. After a while, he suddenly said, I can only see what happened inside the Eternal Night Palace. He doesn't blame you. Wang Xiaohu replied expressionlessly. Musashi shook his head and said, But I didn't think that in that situation. I mean, there will be a change like yours. Now I can't say whether it is your own good fortune or Yu Danxiang's own chance. I'm not him. Wang Xiaohu also shook his head. Master Musashi said, It doesn't matter if you are or not. I was going to give this to him, but now it's the same to give it to you. He directly threw some content carved on the stone slab to Wang Xiaohu. I saw you beat up King of Han. You still don't know how to use your strength. This is the training method on the stone slab. It can help you a little. It's not something exquisite. It's just some skills I figured out when I was bored. Looking at you, you are probably not a mage. Wang Xiaohu looked at the lifelike figure carved on the stone slab. It suddenly stretched out its claw-like fingers and touched the engravings on the stone slab. After a while, it nodded and said, Thank you. What are you going to do next? Master Musashi asked again. It thought for a while and said, Look for food here. Eat more like King of Han. This way, I can become stronger. Master Musashi waved his hand and said, King of Han is not an invincible expert. His power was obtained through trickery. He has never seriously polished it. At best, he is like a child who suddenly got a divine weapon. Of course, there are more or less members like King of Han in the Transcendence Organization. After all, there are many subworlds. There will still be people who are lucky enough to obtain power. But I advise you not to think that you can eat other people just because you can eat King of Han. It seemed to be seriously thinking about this question and soon had an answer. Then I will go to other places and eat more food. After I become stronger, I will come back here. Master Wu Chong chuckled rather helplessly and bitterly. You're single amongst hundreds of original void demons, and you have the true soul of a fishball strong human. I don't know what your situation is either. Half original demon? Mutant? In fact, I can't tell your future now. But if you can become stronger, it won't be bad. It asked curiously, aren't you afraid that I will come back and eat you after I become stronger? Musashi smiled and said, if I am afraid, I will kill you right now. Or do you think that you could be tough in front of me after defeating King of Han? Okay, I will leave here first. It nodded. It didn't seem to be angry at Musashi's words. It was calm, as cold as a stone. Go to the depths of the crevice, Master Musashi said. It frowned in confusion. At this time, Master Wu Chong slowly said, although I don't know what you are, I have seen something similar. That thing is called Void Azura. It also has a human-like posture and even has its own thoughts. Maybe you can find the answer to your essence from the Void Azura. It tilted its head in thought, then asked directly, how do I get there? Musashi said, sit on your Yudanxiang's mount. Void original demons know how to go to the depths of the crevice. Of course, how to make it take you there depends on your own ability. Okay, Wang Xiao nodded. Is there anything else? Master Musashi waved his hand disinterestedly. No, you can get lost. It still didn't get angry and walked right past Musashi out of the stone hut. It then opened its mouth and spat out a palm-sized bone flute from its body and blew it. This was the tool that Yu Danxiang used to summon that void original demon in the form of a flying ant. In a short while, the void original demon that had a grudge against Yu Danxiang for killing his wife had already arrived. It only lingered in the square, not daring to come close. It spread its wings and rode on the back of the flying ant. The flying ant original devil seemed to have sensed a trace of an enemy's aura, but became rather puzzled. The flying ant original devil even felt an inexplicable pressure from its body. It didn't dare to resist and allowed Wang Xiaohu to ride on its back just like that. Wang Xiaohu reached out to touch the antennae on the flying ant's head and said in a low voice, go to the depths of the crevice, or I'll eat you. Hearing Wang Xiaohu's words, Master Musashi couldn't help but open his mouth, but when he saw that the void original demon seemed to understand and was about to spread its wings and fly high, he swallowed the words back into his stomach. Master Musashi. Wang Xiaohu looked down with an indifferent expression and said slowly, when I come back next time, I'll eat you. The first one I'll eat. Then I'll have to go back and sharpen these two almost rusty knives. Master Musashi shrugged carelessly. Wang Xiaohu looked deeply at Musashi and then forcefully grabbed the void original demon's antennae. The void original demon cried out in pain and then directly flew out of the square of the Eternal Night Palace towards the depths of the crevice. When it was completely out of sight, Master Musashi raised his wine cup and took a sip, and then walked into the stone hut alone to take a nap. I heard that the void original demons have a hole in their hearts. They need to fill this hole, but there are no souls in the crevice that can fill this hole, so the void original demons will never stop and will always be looking for food. I'm the first this stupid disciple. Master Musashi's eyelids slowly closed. It's suddenly quiet. Whether it was the king of Han who was finally defeated by Long Yangjun in a subworld, or what happened in the Eternal Night Palace's Colosseum, it didn't seem to affect the daily lives of the Transcendents in Paradise Lost. Many Transcendents were even enthusiastically discussing the battle for the throne emblem that had just ended. What they cared more about was the ability of the newcomer, Erex, and the possibility of snatching the throne emblem from this newcomer. But their discussion didn't last long, and a piece of shocking news came from Paradise Lost. Long Yangjun had already collected 8 throne emblems and directly bypassed several senior members who had been stuck at the 7th emblem and immediately initiated the battle for the throne. And Long Yangjun's opponent in the battle for the throne was the one who led the army to attack heaven not long ago and then returned in defeat. Lionheart. The battle for the throne required at least 3 thrones to be present as witnesses. Currently, only the Fushi throne and the Begatisha throne, who was busy training 2 students, needed 1 more. Therefore, the battle for the throne would begin immediately after the 3rd throne returned. Musashi, Go drink. I want to comprehend the essence of drunken sword. I don't have time, Scram. What a fickle lover. In order to avoid Long Yangjuan's entanglement before the battle, Master Musashi directly walked into the Colosseum, saying that he was going to clean up the place. But when Master Musashi walked into the Colosseum, he was instantly dumbfounded. The Colosseum, which had been compressed by the subspace, was incomparably huge and should have been filled with original void demons. But when Master Musashi arrived, there were only a few original void demons left in the Colosseum. He really killed them all? Master Musashi, whose mouth was wide open, blinked his eyes. But where did they go? This person was naturally Taisetsu. As for Taisetsu's people, Taisetsu had already quietly left the Eternal Night Palace. At the entrance of the crack, he was bored waiting for Miss Maid to open the passage so that she could send him back. There's no concept of time here. Do I have to wait for a long time? Taisetsu squatted on the ground, thought for a while, then took out the dictionary that Miss Maid had given him from his Chinkoan bag. The thick dictionary of the history of the Roman Empire began to read to kill time. The crack in the dimension seemed to be much quieter than any other place. The modern world, on a certain coastline in Britain, a manor. Miss Maid brought Adam to the New World to deal with the matter of the new server for the Master God project. Taisetsu was also sent to the crack to collect materials. Boss Luo, who had suddenly become all alone, could only go to school by himself. This made Luochio involuntarily recall the days before he met Yu Yi. He was in the mood, so he took the town's bus, planning to take the original route to see the surrounding scenery. Good morning, Teacher Pulin. It's you? On the bus, Boss Lu and Teacher Pulin unexpectedly bumped into each other. There were many people on the bus, so naturally, the seats were quite empty. Luochio directly sat down beside Teacher Pulin and asked casually, Teacher Pulin, do you usually take this bus to school? Teacher Pulin shook his head and said, I usually walk. It's just that I went for a run in the morning and ran a little too far and forgot the time, so I had to take the bus back. Although that was the case, Teacher Pulin didn't look like he had just finished his morning run. Instead, there was a bag beside him that was stained with some soil and dew, proving that he was indeed outside the suburbs. The bus slowly drove along a cliff on the coast into the town. When it passed by a large bay, the entire bus couldn't help but tilt a little. Boss Luo suddenly said, It seems that only this road leads to the town. There's indeed only one road here. Teacher Pulin smiled and said, There's another road on the other side, but it'll be easier than this one. As he said this, Teacher Pulin looked out the window at the yellow lady with the yellow teeth who unceasingly flitted past. He said softly, This road is indeed a bit more difficult to walk on, especially when it rains. It's very easy for accidents to happen. Indeed. Luochio nodded. For example, like a car accident. If there's a whole family in the bus, it'll be a very unfortunate thing. Teacher Pulin suddenly looked at Luochio's side face and said indifferently, You seem to have another meaning. Boss Luo looked back at him and shook his head. Nothing. I just feel sorry for this misfortune from a person's point of view. Purely from a person's point of view? You speak as if you're not a person. Teacher Pulin carefully read these words in his heart, but he didn't express the thoughts in his heart. He had a rather deep impression of this new student from the academy, but he vaguely felt that the other party's origins weren't simple. In fact, it was reasonable to think about it. Although this school was very famous, it was located in a remote rural area. If there wasn't another purpose, very few people would choose to study here. Moreover, it was a relatively unpopular theology course. Was it to better inherit the business or something like that? Teacher Pulin couldn't help but think of what Luochio had said before. He was still very curious. What kind of business required theology knowledge? It couldn't be an exorcist family, right? Teacher Pulin had seen exorcists before, and naturally he had also encountered so-called exorcist families. In his life of more than 30 years, he, who had possessed supernatural powers since he was young, had always crisscrossed between the territories of ordinary people and abnormal people. Speaking of which, have you heard of Van Helsing? Teacher Pulin asked suddenly. Luochio looked at Teacher Pulin curiously, as if he didn't understand the topic at this time. Van Helsing. Teacher Poulin smiled slightly and said, "Legend has it that Van Helsing was a very famous monster hunter. He was active in the mid-19th century and hunted many monsters that were harmful to humans." Luaccio asked rather interestedly, "Does Teacher Poulin think that monsters and monster hunters really exist in this world?" Teacher Poulin chuckled. "Just think of it as me simply wanting to relieve some of the silence at this time. Aren't you interested in the topic of gods and monsters, new student at the School of Divinity?" Boss Luo thought for a while and finally said, "I should be interested." "Should be?" Teacher Poulin was startled. "That's an interesting answer, student." Boss Luo said, "After all, it's still very difficult for ordinary people to encounter such things as monsters." "That's not necessarily true," Teacher Poulin said noncommittally. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. At this time, he kept looking out of the window behind Luaccio, facing the sea. Boss Luo looked back and saw that the coastline suddenly darkened. Dark clouds covered the coastline as if it was going to rain. At the same time, there seemed to be a faint singing sound on the road around the mountain. Chapter 1489. It was a cheerful song, as if a girl was singing for her lover from afar. It was poetic, picturesque, and dreamy. Just as the town bus drove past the winding mountain road, along the coastline, and bypassed the beach at the lowest point of the road. In fact, the sky was dark, and the distant sea level was covered with a layer of shadow. A storm was coming. It was supposed to be depressing weather, but on the few people on the bus, a mysterious smile appeared on almost everyone's face, as if they saw something. It was an urgent and blurred look. At this moment, the driver suddenly braked and rushed out of the door, over the guardrail of the road, and rushed to the beach ahead. He was not the first one, the second one, the third one. The passengers on the bus rushed out one after another, regardless of gender or age. They rushed out of the bus, over the guardrail, and rushed to the beach like love. This was Boss Luo's first impression. He quietly watched these passengers' actions and did not stop them. He was not alone. At least at this moment, Ms. Poulin was still with him. Although this sudden abnormal situation was likely to be caused by Ms. Poulin, probably so. He looked back at Ms. Poulin and thought for a while. "I take back what I said just now. Even if it's an ordinary person, as long as he or she has the intention, it's easy to encounter strange things." Ms. Poulin couldn't help but smile. "Student, do you mean I'm the one with the intention?" Boss Luo said ambiguously. "If it's Ms. Poulin, the result will be much better. If I'm the one with the intention, because of my words, it's not necessarily a good thing. For example, last time in South America, an unconscious thought finally led to a mess. Boss Luo couldn't find a way to control the ability to interfere with or even rationalize something. It was just like how you couldn't control those sudden thoughts to not appear. This sentence seems to have another meaning. Ms. Poulin couldn't help but be curious. "Nothing." Boss Luo smiled slightly. "I just suddenly thought of something. It seems that something is coming out." With that said, Luaccio looked at the seaside again. Most of the passengers had walked to the sea. At this time, 3 black figures could be seen flying over from the distant sea. In the blink of an eye, the black figures floated to the surface of the water. They were actually 3 beautiful women with long brown hair, grayish-green eyes, and fair skin. Their naked bodies above the seawater were barely visible because of their reddish-brown hair mixed with the seawater. The 3 women opened their small mouths slightly, and a seductive and beautiful singing voice came from their mouths. The driver, who was the first to run to the beach, had already stepped into the sea and walked towards one of the naked beauties. The resistance of the sea didn't stop his passion at this moment. Soon, he was hugging one of the beauties. This was probably the composition that the photographer was looking for. If one ignored the beauty's current actions, this naked beauty's seductive lips suddenly split open at this moment. The teeth inside were like saws, sharp and dense, frightening. At this moment, she bit the driver's neck. Strangely, the driver's eyes seemed to be blurred at this moment, as if he couldn't feel the pain at all. But in an instant, the other 2 beauties also hugged the other passengers, revealing their terrifying teeth. In the car. Acroids. Teacher Pu Lin's voice was heard. He had already left his seat. He placed his hands on a seat in the row near the seaside and bent down to look ahead through the window. He slowly said, "This is also the so-called siren." Siren? Luaccio blinked. When he was in Kelowna, he had met a lot of big and small monsters, but he didn't know much about the inhuman outside of Kelowna. He had only seen creatures like vampires and golden dragons a few days ago when he entered the inhuman domain. He remembered that Miss Maid once mentioned the siren. Last year, when he went to the seaside fishing village with Ren Xiling and Li Zi for a holiday, they occasionally talked about it. According to Miss Maid, the siren was almost extinct, and some of them were hidden near the Barents Sea. But it was not far from the sea on the British side. There are a few little guys who fled here. Teacher Pu Lin nodded and said, their parents were killed by a few monster hunters some time ago. They also escaped from that disaster. After that, they fled all the way to this vicinity. Don't worry, they won't really eat people. They'll only suck a little of their blood and let them go. Their saliva contains special ingredients that can make people anesthetized. As for their singing, it has a hypnotic effect. After these passengers wake up, they will forget what happened. Luaccio looked at Mr. Poulin and found that he was carefully observing the scene in front of him. He had said so much, so obviously, he knew these young sirens long ago. Why did he still observe them so carefully? It seems that Mr. Poulin's morning exercise includes supervising these young sirens. Luaccio thought for a while and understood something. Mr. Poulin looked quite helpless. I'm really doing exercise, and I do have something to do in the suburbs. As for meeting them, I can only say that it's just a coincidence. In fact, they come ashore almost once a week. If you want to see them next time, you can come at the same time. Why do you need to supervise them? Boss Luo asked curiously. Mr. Poulin said indifferently, every life has its natural process of birth and death, just like the withering of trees and the drying of the sea. This is the law of nature. Don't you think it's disrespectful to life if this process is distorted because of human actions? Boss Luo nodded. That's right, these passengers seem to have a long life and can do a lot of things. So, Mr. Poulin is equivalent to the manager of raw rice. Teacher Pu Lin seemed to be somewhat unaccustomed to the word manager. He slightly furrowed his brows and even revealed a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. He shook his head and said, I just don't want to hurt these passengers because of them, but I also don't want to see them get hurt. If their foraging really isn't a big hindrance to the passengers and doesn't affect anything, don't you think this is the best situation? Of course, since we want to guarantee this situation, we need to have a judge at all times. What if the judge is absent once, and then an accident happens this time? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Teacher Pu Lin glanced at Luo Chio and said with a wry smile, this is really a sharp and mean question. It's like asking me whether I can help the weak all the time after helping them occasionally. If I can't do it, I wouldn't have done it in the first place, right? Boss Luo smiled casually. He was the type who was used to asking questions, but rarely gave opinions. He always thought that his opinions could only represent himself. As for others, this was the beauty of the biological diversity of human beings. Teacher Pu Lin shook his head and gave his own answer. If an accident really happened because of my departure, then it can only mean that the fate of both sides has come to an end. Since this relationship has come to an end, then what else do I have to blame myself for? What a beautiful explanation. Boss Luo nodded and continued to observe the movements of the three young sirens. Just as Teacher Pu Lin had said, they quickly let go of their respective first prey and then looked for the second one. Every prey had only sucked a bit of fresh blood. From a physiological point of view, this indeed wouldn't affect one's health. Donating blood was actually helpful in the reconstruction of the human body's blood. Soon, the young sirens seemed to have eaten their fill. They let go of the passengers and then walked toward the bus. They did not seem to dare to walk to the shore. They only dared to look at the bus from afar. Then, they slowly retreated, probably afraid of something, until they finally disappeared into the sea. The dark sky seemed to be clearer. Because there was no driver, he and Teacher Pu Lin could only sit quietly in the car at this time, waiting for the driver and passengers who had fainted by the seaside to wake up. In fact, this should be the case, but Teacher Pu-Lin got out of the car at this time. She moved the driver and passengers back one by one and placed them in their original positions. They seem to be afraid of you, Teacher Pu-Lin. Boss Luo, who didn't help at all, said while keeping an appearance of looking on with folded arms. Mr. Pu-Lin did not turn his head and said casually, "Isn't it because I am the one who supervised them?" Boss Luo just smiled and then returned to his position. Soon after, the unconscious driver and passengers gradually woke up, but they completely forgot what had happened. Their clothes were wet and the bus suddenly stopped on the road, but they did not lose their belongings, which was very puzzling. However, when they looked at the time, it was obvious that a lot of time had passed. The anxious passengers could only urge the driver to continue. Rumble. The town's bus continued to move forward according to the original route. At this time, Boss Luo suddenly turned his head to look at Teacher Pu-Lin and said, "I heard that the siren is the maid of Persephone, the queen of hell, but because she failed to fulfill her duty of protecting Persephone, the queen of hell, she was punished to become a monster and guide the souls to the underworld." Mr. Pu-Lin shrugged and then praised, "You don't know much about mythology, but the answers after class won't add any points. As the rumors say, it's really hard to get credits for your class." Boss Luo smiled. On the way, they did not talk about the siren. Boss Luo did not ask Mr. Pu-Lin more, and Mr. Pu-Lin did not ask about the origin of this new student. There were no cars on the road near the beach for a while, but a small black shadow suddenly jumped out from the grass by the roadside. It was a black cat. The black cat easily jumped over the guardrail of the road and then walked into the beach area. It walked along the coastline, and because of its lightness, it did not leave any footprints on the sand that had become fine and firm due to the seawater. Not long after, the black cat came to a group of reefs. It jumped skillfully among the grotesquely shaped reefs and finally stopped at someone's feet. It was a man. His back was facing the black cat, and he was looking at the narrow sea in front of him through the gap between the reefs. Soon, the black cat that was not satisfied with just rubbing under his feet suddenly jumped in front of him. He reached out and hugged the black cat in his arms. The black cat was trembling in the man's arms, as if it was afraid of something. "Did you meet the person that you are afraid of again?" The man lowered his head and stroked the black cat's back silently. After a long time, the black cat completely calmed down. Its body did not tremble anymore, and then it jumped down from the man's arms. After a few jumps, the black cat disappeared among the reefs. The man sighed softly, reached into his arms, and took out something less than the size of a palm. It was a red and blue button, a remote control. Could it be? This time it will be. The man whispered something, and his fingers rubbed back and forth on the red and blue buttons. Maybe he wanted to press it, or maybe he did not want to press it, or maybe he did not dare to press it and did not know which one to press in the end. "This is not what I want anymore," he finally sighed, put the red and blue button remote control in his arms, and finally left the group of reefs. In the distant time and space, the mansion of the underworld, in the palace of the king of hell. When Joe woke up from his deep sleep, he found himself on a big soft bed, but the surroundings were not bright, whether it was the walls, the floor, or even the big bed. The furniture in the room was not gray, but black, and even the sky outside the window was very dark. There was no light, but even if it was dark, he could still see everything clearly. It seemed that someone had dimmed the color here. But Joe felt a trace of coldness. Where was this place? How did he come to this place? He only remembered that he seemed to be taken to the seaside by the big sister. And then, what happened after that, he could not remember clearly. "Big sister? Big sister? Big sister, are you there? Where's this place?" The young Joe climbed down from the bed. "Big sister, is this your room? Big sister?" He kept on yelling. At this moment, the door of the room creaked open. Then, a beautiful woman in maid attire slowly pushed a dining cart in. Joe couldn't help but widen his eyes in surprise. This woman was obviously not the big sister he knew, but he was not sure because the big sister he knew liked to change into various appearances to tease him. "Big sister?" Joe asked tentatively. "Big sister?" The maid looked at Joe with confusion and thought for a while. "You seem to have mistaken me for someone else, but I'm sorry. We didn't know each other before. My name is GC, the maid of Nether Queen, and now I'm responsible for taking care of you, young master." Joe blinked his eyes. "What was young master?" "I'm Joe." Chapter 1490. Within the enormous palace, Persephone, the underworld queen, who was wearing a long black dress, stood in front of a mirror and looked at her own makeup. Not far away, the master of the underworld was holding a dark red wine cup and looking at the sky. Hades suddenly said, "The winter in the underworld is ending." Hearing this, the underworld queen turned around and looked at Hades gently. She said indifferently, "There should be 4 seasons in a year." Hades just smiled casually. He was still looking outside the palace. The mountains, the greenish-black, lifeless mountains, and the purgatory land that flowed with sulfur and magma. As the underworld king, who was in charge of the underworld, he couldn't even tell if this scenery was ugly or beautiful. At first, he felt that it was barren and not beautiful. The scenery on Mount Olympus was very beautiful. You shouldn't have adopted a human child who accidentally wandered into this place as your adopted son. The underworld queen suddenly said, "Humans can't adapt to the environment of the underworld. You just want a toy to relieve your boredom. Hades, you shouldn't do this for a toy. The creatures of the underworld can't accept a human as their young master." Hades turned around with a smile. "Persephone, you may want to see this child. He's so lovable. His fair skin is just like yours, and his eyes are just like yours. This will stop me from missing you while you're away. Furthermore, he's completely able to adapt to the environment of the underworld. He's no ordinary human." The underworld queen frowned slightly at the underworld king's words of love. "You mean this child is not human? He is the descendant of a human and a god, like a demigod like Hercules?" The underworld king said indifferently, "My underworld queen, please don't mention me in my territory. It will remind me of your father." The underworld queen looked at the underworld king silently. Then, she turned around and didn't say anything. She was the queen of the underworld. She couldn't even use her magic in the underworld. She needed to return to the ground. She was the goddess of fertility on the ground. Hades was truly fond of this magical boy. He had even sent the underworld empress' own maid to him. But this didn't seem to matter much. Winter was about to end. She was about to leave this underground abyss and return to the surface. Perhaps when the next winter comes and she returns to the underworld again, the child would already be gone. After all, the master of the underworld is so capricious. Who knows what the future holds? "Big sister, why did you call me young master?" After all, Joe was only a 5-year-old child. His mind didn't allow him to think too much. Only this kind of sudden situation could make him think. Besides, this big sister was really beautiful as that bad big sister. Was she really not the bad big sister who had transformed into her? Where did the bad big sister go? The maid in front of him. The woman who called herself G.C. said expressionlessly, "You are now the adopted son of the master of underworld. Naturally, you are the young master of this underworld creature. From today onwards, your status will be noble. At least, that's how it looks right now." Joe blinked and lowered his head. "Big sister, I want to go home. I have been out for a long time. If I don't go back, my father and grandmother will be worried about me." The maid G.C. said indifferently, "This is your home, young master. Your current identity is the underworld's young master, and your only father is the underworld king. You will be like this from now on. At least, that's how it looks right now." "I don't want to," Joe shouted loudly. At this moment, he experienced the fighting strength of a naughty child. He directly rolled on the ground, crying and shouting. That's right, he was like those naughty children that relatives brought over when they called their relatives over. The kind that wanted to be beaten to death. However, it was clear that the maid who was sent here was not a gentle and rational person. Facing Joe's tantrum, the maid, Jess, directly grabbed Joe's calf, lifted him upside down, and walked towards the balcony. "Young master, please stop your tantrum. The palace should be kept quiet. You probably don't like the heat of the lava below." A wave of hot air mixed with the pungent smell of sulfur rose from below. Joe looked at the orange-red river below in horror. He even saw the bubbles that were constantly popping and bursting on the surface of the orange-red river. As expected, he quickly stopped crying. This big sister, who was worse than a bad big sister, reminded Joe of the Annie at his home. That Annie was really fierce when she beat people up. This evil big sister. Very good. Have you quieted down, young master? The maid GC nodded at this moment, but she still had the same look of disdain as before. Please forgive my rudeness, but the Underworld King ordered me to take care of your daily life and teach you the rules of Underworld. I don't. Joe suddenly shuddered, but when he looked at the maid GC's eyes, he couldn't say the word "I don't want." He was terrified. At this moment, a hearty laughter sounded. Joe looked up and saw a figure bathed in golden light, appearing above the balcony of the palace. The maid GC frowned at this moment and quickly put down the new young master of Underworld. She said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Greetings, Messenger Hermes." The figure in front of her walked out of the golden light. It was a handsome blond young man wearing a pair of winged shoes and holding a snake-coiled staff. He said casually, "It's time. I'm here to welcome the goddess of fertility back to the ground. 3 more days, Messenger Hermes." The maid GC was still neither servile nor overbearing. The young man, Hermes, said indifferently, "Father God said that this year's winter will end early. Spring should come early because the ground is too cold. Many innocent people have frozen to death in the cold winter. Because of this, the Queen of Heaven often laments and cries. You know, GC, Father God loves the Queen of Heaven so deeply, just like how the Underworld King cherishes Persephone. Father God and the Queen of Heaven really love each other like that. It would be strange." The maid GC nodded silently. "Okay, Messenger Hermes, I will convey your purpose, but you have to meet the Underworld King in person." "Of course." Hermes smiled slightly. "How can I not like to see Uncle Hades? But before that, can you tell me what's going on with this human child? Why is there a living creature in the underworld? This doesn't seem to be in accordance with the rules, does it?" She probably knew that Hermes would ask about this sooner or later, so when she was asked, there was no panic on her face. "Messenger Hermes, this is the will of the Lord of the Underworld. If you want to know, perhaps you should wait until you see him and ask him in person." Hermes shrugged with an indifferent attitude. He then looked around and suddenly asked, "By the way, where's Minta? Why don't I see her?" The maid, GC, glanced at Hermes indifferently, then pointed at a wasteland outside the palace walls. But in this underworld where all living things had died out, it seemed that only this wasteland had strangely grown a patch of emerald green. Hermes then noticed the existence of the green and looked at it curiously. "This looks like mint grass." "Minta has died," the maid GC said faintly. "This is the mint grass that grew from her ashes." "How did she die?" Hermes couldn't help but frown. The maid GC didn't speak at this time. Instead, she turned around and then slowly knelt down. Seeing this, Hermes turned his gaze and then directly flew into the room. He stood quietly, bowed his head, and said respectfully, "Greetings, Pluto." Joe had been listening to the evil elder sister and the big brother who could fly talking, but he didn't dare to speak. At this time, when he saw their actions, he quickly looked over and was shocked. He saw a tall figure standing in the room without him knowing. He even saw the other party's eyes and couldn't help but shiver. His body seemed to be frozen, and his mind was blank. He couldn't say anything. "Hermes." The arrival of the Netherworld King caused a slight change in the atmosphere of the room. "I already know why you're here. However, winter on Earth will not stay here in advance. Go back and tell your father that the Netherworld Mansion is very spacious. You don't have to worry about the space here. Come back in 3 days." Hermes raised his head and said, "Pluto, going and coming back is too time-consuming. Since it's only 3 days, let me stay in the mansion of the dead and wait." "As you wish." Pluto said indifferently and then waved his hand. "GC, prepare a place for Hermes to rest." After that, the maid GC led the emissary from Mount Olympus out of the room. When they left, Hermes couldn't help but look back at the only child in the room, Joe. He secretly winked at Joe, as if he was giving some kind of hint. His finger secretly pointed outside the palace. It seemed to be the place outside the palace where the green was. Soon, only Pluto and Joe were left in the room. "Raise your head and tell me your name," the tall figure suddenly said. Joe subconsciously trembled and raised his head. At this time, his voice also trembled as he said his name. "Joe. My name is Joe." Pluto nodded and then said indifferently, "From today onwards, you have to forget your previous name. You will be my son. Your name will be Pulin." Joe subconsciously nodded. He even seemed to have forgotten how to say no. He didn't dare to go against the will of the other party. "These few days, GC will be in charge of taking care of and teaching you." Pluto continued, "3 days later, I will come back this year. I hope that by that time, you've already adapted to this place, my child." Joe could only subconsciously nod. Hades then turned around and left. His body turned into a black fog and gradually disappeared. At this time, Joe sat down on the ground. He resisted the urge to cry. He hugged his knees and sobbed. "I want to go home. Big sister, where are you?" But this time, the bad big sister didn't suddenly appear and tease him. The winter in the Mansion of the Dead was very cold. In fact, the Mansion of the Dead seemed to only have winter, right? Outside the window of the palace, a figure slowly walked over and walked to the only green place full of mint grass. He stood there and looked at the huge palace in front of him. He subconsciously frowned. This was old Hahu came to the Mansion of the Dead with Nero because of the remote control. He called himself Hades. "Father." He called softly toward the huge palace behind the tall wall and clenched his fists. The remote control with red and blue buttons was placed on the table just like that. Nero's gaze would glance at the remote control from time to time, but she didn't do anything. She just kept moving her lips quickly to serve the shop owner in front of her. She told him some things about her boss. The shop owner listened carefully, and his expression didn't change. It seemed that no matter what the future looked like, it couldn't move him. As for Eleanor, who was the maid at that time, she would occasionally frown. Obviously, this should be normal. After all, she was listening to a black soul who was the next shop owner's subordinate, telling what happened to the next shop owner. Moreover, according to Nero's words, the next shop owner was a man who was so bad that words couldn't describe him. How could such a man replace the current shop owner and become the next shop owner? "My boss's 12th wife's name is Su Zijuan." Nero rolled her eyes. "Speaking of which, this Su Zijuan is very powerful. She is the last princess of the Xianyuan royal family in Kelowna. Not only is she powerful, but she is also super rich. She likes to play a little toy called the Heir's Ball of Delights with my boss. Have you seen the Heir's Ball of Delights? Let me tell you, this Heir's Ball of Delights is actually ridiculous." Finally, Eleanor, the maid at that time, seemed to have reached the limit of her patience. At this moment, she frowned and looked at Nero sternly, saying in a deep voice, "Nonsense! How dare you tease the shop owner like this?" Nero stuck out her tongue at this time, then looked at the shop owner with a pitiful look. "But what I said is true. If you don't believe it, you can go to the future and see if it's true. You can do it, right? After all, you are the shop owner." "You." Eleanor's pupils contracted slightly, and the sternness in her eyes deepened. At this moment, Nero directly lowered her neck and shrank back. This former maid was much easier to get along with than the maid in her house. At the very least, she could show her emotions occasionally. Then I won't say that Eleanor will become my boss's 13th concubine." At this moment, Nero had a limited smile and said with a smile, "Former shop owner, I'm afraid that your maid will beat me to death. If it was in the past, I would also want to beat you to death." Finally, the shop owner at that time said indifferently. This was the first sentence he said after listening to the stories of the next shop owner and his wives. Chapter 1491. "If it was in the past, I would have beaten you to death too." Such words of warning, in the end, it still made Nero reveal a subtle expression of strategic retreat. This was because she could not figure out the temperament of the former shop owner, whether she had the same temperament as her boss Luo. Thus, Nero obediently raised her hands and made a gesture of surrender. She looked at Eleanor, who would have already beaten her up if not for the fact that she had to abide by her duties. "All right, I admit that I'm talking nonsense. My boss doesn't have 13 concubines. He only has 7 concubines at most. Currently, well, I mean in the future, he's planning on how to get Miss Eleanor. Master, Eleanor requests to purchase a chance to privately judge the unknown onyx soul before her. The servant girl calmed down abruptly, but under her calm expression, she spoke with a turbulent undercurrent. What was a shop? A shop was a shop where one could buy anything. Furthermore, the customers of the shop were never just customers outside the shop. They were also customers of the shop. A private judge? Nero could not help but open her mouth. To be able to make revenge sound so good. It was indeed the servant girl style. She looked at Eleanor in surprise, secretly guessing what kind of unspeakable relationship this servant girl had with the future servant girl. In some ways, Nero even felt that her servant girl's temperament was similar to Eleanor's. The servant girl, the next servant girl? Could it be some kind of inheritance? Nero, who was letting her imagination run wild, did not seem to care whether the former shop owner would agree to Eleanor's request. She had her own thoughts about the situation she was currently in. Nero did not believe in the nonsense of not fighting one's own family. The Michael Club she grew up in was a place filled with all kinds of competition. Now that the former shop owner knew that the shop would change hands in the future, how could he not have any thoughts? The position of the shop owner was like the position of an omniscient and omnipotent god in the truest sense. While Nero's imagination was running wild, and she even began to formulate a battle of time and space, the servant girl beside her was obviously waiting for the shop owner's reply. She believed that her master would give her a satisfactory answer. I won't turn away any customer who wants to trade with the shop, Eleanor. The shop owner, at that time, slowly said, but in terms of the most basic etiquette, she belongs to the next black soul. In theory, the next employee and I belong to the same shop system. In terms of etiquette, without the consent of the next employee, I don't recommend making decisions on the next employee. Of course, this is only my personal opinion, Eleanor. You can still insist on your choice. Like I said, I will not refuse any customer who trades with my shop. Hearing this, Eleanor fell into deep thought. On the other hand, Nero was standing on a stool, sharpening his knife. He was obviously very interested in going all out. After all, her life lantern was in the Ark of the Covenant. Even if it was only the future Ark of the Covenant, Boss Luo should still have a way to revive her, right? Dying in the past and resurrecting in the Ark of the Covenant in the right time and space was the simplest and most violent way Nero could think of to escape. Well, it was probably a method that only someone with her unique brain would think of. Eleanor understands. The servant girl at that time sighed softly. When she looked at Nero again, her gaze had become indifferent, as if she was looking at a piece of sand by the roadside. Nero blinked and said cheekily, "An employee who listens to the boss has no soul. He won't get a promotion or a raise." Eleanor naturally ignored her. The shop owner, at that time, said, "Don't provoke Eleanor with your words. If you want to go back to the future, I will send you back. So, you don't have to rush to return by resurrecting from the Ark of the Covenant. Since the next employee sent you here, he naturally has his reasons. You can stay for a while longer." Nero opened her mouth like a deflated balloon and sat down. The most difficult opponent was this kind of person who could see through all your thoughts at a glance. She frowned and looked at him. "Will you really send me back?" The shop owner said indifferently, "Sending you back to the future is not as difficult as you think, because the necessary props are already here. All you need is some power to activate it." Nero subconsciously glanced at the remote control on the table again. This was Old Ha's thing, but according to the current situation, this was probably something that Old Ha got from her boss in a future that was even more distant than her original time and space. Was the boss's aesthetic at that time so different to this extent? Was this remote control really ugly? "You're saying that my boss specially sent me back here?" Nero instantly frowned again, recalling what had happened in the past few days. Meeting Joe, meeting Old Ha, meeting Teacher Pu Lin, and finally going back to the past through the remote control because of the battle on the beach. Was it actually the boss who looked like a herbivore at home, who was manipulating things behind the scenes? It's not the him you know. The shop owner, at that time, shook his head lightly. As expected, he was always aware of Nero's thoughts. This made Nero feel an inexplicable chill. She didn't show it. She just showed an innocent face as if she wanted to eat a lollipop. Then who is it? The shop owner, at that time, said indifferently. Or, it's him who even he doesn't know. After all, under normal circumstances, we can't know what we will look like in the future. My head hurts. Nero looked at him pitifully. The shop owner, at that time, still shook his head. He suddenly stood up, handed the remote control directly to Eleanor, and said indifferently, I'm tired and want to rest. Nero will stay here during this time. You're responsible for looking after her, Eleanor. Wait a minute, former shop owner. Please make yourself clear. I can give you a special service. Nero tried to squeeze her breasts, but she realized that they were not as big as Eleanor's normal breasts. So she gave up. Only the figure of this shop owner, at that time, slowly went up to the upper floor of the shop and gradually disappeared. Nero sighed, with an exaggerated, pitiful expression. She turned to look at Eleanor and begged, Sister, if you promise not to beat me to death, I'll tell you who I'll sleep with in the future, okay? I'll beat you to death. Eleanor looked at Nero and sneered. Then, she suddenly regained her elegant smile and chuckled. You're a future employee. How can I casually destroy the property of the shop? Since you're here, it just so happens that the shop lacks a servant. Work hard for the next few days. With that, Eleanor snapped her fingers, and Nero's clothes were taken out and replaced with a new set of maid's clothes. Huh? Nero blinked and realized that not only did she change her clothes, but she also had a broom and a trash spatula in her hands. If it was just cleaning the shop that could be seen with the naked eye, wouldn't it be more tiring than cleaning the manor? Not here. Eleanor chuckled again and snapped her fingers again. Everything in front of her changed instantly. They were now in a vast and huge forest. There were countless beasts and strange birds in the forest, and the old trees were entangled with their roots. The surrounding area was filled with the smell of rotten leaves and animal excrement, which was extremely pungent. This is a world fragment that I'm going to sell. You have to clean it up before handing it to the customer. Eleanor smiled and said, I'll leave it to you. If you don't clean it up, you won't be able to leave. Huh? Nero opened her mouth again and looked at the boundless forest around her. A feeling of despair that was comparable to copying books more than 200,000 times suddenly arose in her heart. Her tone of voice, why did it sound more and more like, oh, right? Eleanor suddenly said softly, You seem to be very weak now. Is it because of this remote control? If that's the case, this place is more or less dangerous for you. It's almost dark. I suggest you find a place to hide first. After all, it's more lively here at night. Huh? Nero suddenly opened her eyes wide. Wait, you really don't know you ye she-devil? Hey, don't go. Oh, she finally said, the voice that was hidden in her heart. She-devil or something. But Eleanor had already disappeared. After shouting a few words, Nero finally gave up. She looked around and suddenly felt something dripping down from above. Sticky, huge balls of liquid. Nero subconsciously looked up and saw that on the huge, old tree branches, there were dozens of huge, snake-like monsters with a length of 30 to 40 meters. They all looked down at her. Didn't you say it's more lively at night? I don't believe you. Nero shouted and immediately ran into the forest frantically. Above the forest, Miss Maid at that time frowned when she saw the figure running away in the forest through the tall and dense leaves. She muttered to herself, could it be that the next shop owner will really, this onyx soul, whose mouth was full of nonsense, was obviously talking nonsense. She instantly shook her head and turned to leave. Since the shop owner was resting, she also had some relatively free time. Anyway, she didn't need to prepare food for the shop owner. What a waste of my good cooking skills, she thought in her heart. The shop owner's room was relatively simple. There weren't many decorations, but there was a music box in front of the desk. The shop owner, at that time, sat in front of the desk and looked at it silently. He seemed to be thinking about something. Reversing time, what a big deal. The shop owner, at that time, shook his head slightly. I don't know how much it cost. Even now, I don't know. What do you want to pass to me? The reason why he didn't send Nero away was that even he at that time couldn't understand the meaning of this at this moment. There were obviously more and more questions in his heart, even to the point that he frowned. The biggest question had already emerged in his heart. Why? Why did the Origin allow you to do this kind of thing? He suddenly opened the music box on the desk, and a clear sound slowly sounded. There are not only sound gears in the music box, but also other things. Astonishingly, they were gold and silver cards. He reached out his hand and stroked the gold and silver cards, not saying anything. After a long time, a young girl's voice suddenly sounded in the room. Araya, the manager of the subworld number 003 is at your service. The shop owner, at that time, raised his head and asked indifferently, show me the data migration progress of the subworld number 003. I want to change something. Yes, the mansion of the underworld, the palace of the king of hell. Although he had already stayed in the palace under the arrangement of the maid GC, Hermes still hadn't seen the target he needed to pick up this time, the queen of hell. Since the king of hell said 3 days later, he naturally could only do it 3 days later. He couldn't beat the master of the mansion of the underworld. Anyway, if the Father God wanted to blame him, he could just push the blame to the king of hell. But it was obviously unrealistic to let the messenger stay in the room for 3 days. Hermes wasn't the kind of person who could stay calm. The messenger Hermes showed a smile at this time, then quietly left the room and came to the green grassland outside the palace. It was obviously quite a wonderful thing to be able to find such a mint grassland in the mansion of the underworld. Hermes lay on the grassland and leisurely played the flute. Soon after, a small figure climbed up the slope where the grassland was located with difficulty. When he came in front of Hermes, he was already covered in mud. Hermes put down the flute and glanced at him. This small figure was naturally the human child he found when he arrived. What a smart little guy. Hermes smiled slightly. I just gave you a hint, but you actually understood. How did you come out? Joe. Now that the king of hell had decided on his new name to be Poulin, he thought for a while and said, I saw that there was no one outside the room, so I walked out. Big brother, why did you call me here? I was just a little bored and happened to be curious about you. Hermes shrugged. Then, child, can you tell me, why did you come back to the mansion of the underworld? As a human, the king of hell seems to treat you differently? Joe said, I don't know. He said that I am his child from now on. But I don't want to stay here at all. I want to go home. Big brother, can you take me away from here? Hermes suddenly opened his eyes wide and sat up in disbelief, saying in astonishment, that old guy Hades actually adopted you as his son? As soon as the words left his mouth, Hermes immediately covered his mouth. Then, he looked around with trepidation. When he saw that there was no one around, he secretly sighed in relief. Then, he pulled Joe and steered the flying wing boots to fly further away. Chapter 1492. Obviously, this was not an easy thing to understand. Maybe it was just the child's hysteria. Hermes thought, but if this is just a silly child, why did Pluto take Joe as his adopted son? This question gave rise to countless doubts in Hermes' heart. Based on his intuition, he subconsciously believed that every word Joe said was true. But the bad big sister? Mr. Smith? Mr. Death? Mr. Death must be talking about Pluto. Did Pluto personally come to the human world to bring this child to the underworld? Is there anything special about this child? More and more questions spurred Hermes to uncover the truth behind this. Ever since Hermes seized Mount Olympus from the second king of gods, his uncle, who had become Hades, seemed to be extremely dissatisfied with this. I want to see what secrets you have. Hermes looked directly into Joe's eyes. This suddenly made Joe feel dizzy, and then his consciousness became empty. He seemed to have lost the consciousness of his body, and his face became dull in an instant. Child, come to my side. Tell me what else Pluto said to you. Hermes whispered in Joe's ear at this time. But the messenger from Mount Olympus probably did not expect that the strange child in front of him had been known long ago. He did not even hide anything. And what he did at this time violated some of the restrictions imposed by Pluto when he decided to take Joe as his adopted son. At this time, a shadow slowly emerged behind Joe. Joe was still in a daze, but Hermes' expression changed slightly. Accompanied by the emotion of the shadow, it was the shadow of Pluto. The dense power of death surged towards Hermes from all directions. The power of this power of death was so strong that it even made Hermes think that he might very well die in the underworld. He had the protection of the divine king on him, but at this moment, the power of death was directly corroding his body. The lightning protection of the divine king was instantly destroyed. Has the power of Pluto surpassed? Hermes gasped, and his face was full of disbelief. How is this possible? No, I can't wait to bring Persephone back to the surface. I must bring this information back to Mount Olympus. Hermes didn't hesitate at all, nor did he have any intention of resisting the shadow of the underworld king. The wings on his soaring winged boots flapped slightly, and he rushed into the sky of the underworld. Unexpectedly, the phantom of the king of hell, behind Joe, suddenly reached out and grabbed Hermes, who was high up in the sky, by a large hand, and slammed him down to the ground. The impact produced a loud sound, and the ground collapsed. Hermes, who was in the center, not only vomited blood, his consciousness also became blurry. His body couldn't withstand such a throw. Hermes, whose heart was in turmoil, once again had a horrifying thought. The power of Hades might have really surpassed that of the master of Mount Olympus. He had been hiding this power in the underworld for so many years. At this time, under the cover of the phantom of the king of hell, Joe slowly floated to Hermes' side. Looking down, Hermes knew that the Nether King was observing him through the shadow, so he forced out a seemingly relaxed smile. Nether King, my uncle, may I ask why I've done to anger you? I'm really sorry. Maybe I haven't been to the underworld for too long, so I forgot some of the rules. Please forgive me, my dear Uncle Hades. Hermes, the god who is good at deception. The voice of Hades sounded from the phantom behind Joe. I need you to do something for me. Hermes frowned subconsciously. He knew that Hades was talking to him about a condition, and it was obviously a condition that he couldn't refuse, but he couldn't figure out why Hades mentioned that he was good at deception. My dear Uncle Hades, what can I do for you? Hermes rolled his eyes. You know, the Father's watching me all the time. I'm afraid I can't do it. Hades, the phantom, slowly spoke. His voice was filled with vicissitudes. I have not seen the sunlight of the earth for a very, very long time. I have not seen the daytime of Mount Olympus. I have even gradually forgotten the feeling of warmth. Persephone's arrival only brought winter to the underworld. Hermes opened his mouth, somewhat uncertain and even a little frightened. Hades, do you want to leave the underworld? How can this be? Once you leave the underworld, the power of death will come to the human world, and the balance will be broken. The Father won't allow you to leave the underworld. Zeus, the phantom of Hades, said indifferently. He won't allow me to leave the underworld, just like he won't allow the Sea King to appear on land. This is indeed a problem. Hermes quickly said, I heard that there is a mirror. No matter where you are, you can see what you want to see. Great Pluto, my Uncle Hades, you know how fast I am. I'll be able to get the mirror for you very soon. You can also see the sunlight of the earth in the underworld and the daytime of Mount Olympus. The most beautiful scenery in the world will be presented in front of you one by one. Hermes, you still don't understand what I mean. Well, it may be a kind of happiness to not understand. At this time, the phantom of Hades suddenly separated from Joe's body and then directly covered Hermes' body. It was like some kind of substance that invaded his body, little by little, through the pores of Hermes' divine body, and drilled into his body. Hermes was in great pain. His wails were like that of a criminal who was being punished. He was rolling on the ground, twitching as he endured unimaginable pain. Hades! Hades! Hermes, who was on the verge of collapse, screamed at this moment. What do you want to do? Are you going to kill the god of Mount Olympus? Aren't you afraid that the thunder of the god of the sky will come to this land of death? Don't worry, no one will know that you are dead. The phantom of Hades said faintly, because the next one to become Hermes will be me. Instantly, Hermes seemed to have thought of a huge conspiracy that seemed to have unknowingly covered the whole Mount Olympus. At the moment of his death, he had an intuition that surpassed the past. Hades, are you going to impersonate me and enter Mount Olympus? Yes and no. That is a matter for the future. The phantom of Hades finally disappeared completely into Hermes' body. When the last bit of the shadow merged with Hermes' body, Hermes' anger and cries of pain all disappeared. He lay motionless on the cracked ground, and his eyes gradually became dim and lifeless. After a long time, Hermes slowly got up, lowered his head, and looked at his hands. Then he moved his body and showed a strange smile. Without further ado, Hermes directly grabbed the back of Joe's collar, lifted him up, and then stepped on the flying wing boots and headed toward the palace of Hades. Even I don't know your origin, but obviously your arrival has brought me luck that even the goddess of fate wouldn't dare to give me. Hermes lowered his head to look at the unconscious Joe, and a strange smile appeared on his face again. Little fellow, as my adopted son, you will inherit the throne of the king of hell. The underworld has always needed a master. Soon, Hermes brought Joe back to the castle and didn't alarm many palace guards. But obviously, the maid, GC, who was taking care of Joe, was alerted. Master Hermes, may I ask why you took young master out without permission? And GC stared at Hermes indifferently. I hope you won't tell me what happened to young master. Relax. Hermes smiled slightly. He is just tired, so he fell asleep. If you don't believe me, you can check it yourself. The maid, GC, took Joe over dubiously and carefully checked him. Hermes couldn't help but bitterly smile and said, Is my trustworthiness so low? This really makes me sad. GC. After all, Hermes' messenger is also the master of deceit and deception. The maid, GC, said indifferently, I just don't want the mission given to me by Hades to be messed up. Otherwise, I will be very tired and annoyed. Actually, I don't like to use deception. Hermes shook his head and said, What I hope is that all sincerity can shine on the whole human world like the glory of the rising sun. The maid, GC, didn't say anything. She just held Joe and left Hermes' side. Hermes chuckled at this moment, as if he was quite satisfied that he could deceive GC. When the maid, GC, finally left, Hermes slowly turned around and looked at a place behind him. He looked for a while and then walked over expressionlessly. At this moment, a black shadow slowly emerged from the place where there was no one. I thought you were going to hide all the time. Hermes looked at old Ha with a face full of curiosity. It's really interesting. I actually feel the same power from your body as mine. Who are you? The figure in front of Hermes was old Ha, the old Ha who met Nero. When he looked at Hermes, his expression was clearly not calm. Instead, it was complicated. Old Ha suddenly said to Hermes, Hell has always needed a master. Hermes, who had been invaded by Hades' shadow, frowned at this moment. Oh, old Ha shook his head. His eyes suddenly became fierce, and he said in a deep voice, Hades, you can't leave the underworld because once you leave, the balance will be broken. It will open a gap in the underworld and bring a huge disaster to the human world. At that time, the Pearl of the Sky will have a reason to lead the main gods on Mount Pantheon to suppress you. Everyone knows that. Hermes sneered. Old Ha was neither in a hurry nor in a hurry, but his expression did not look relaxed. So you're looking for a substitute, a host that can accommodate your power of death and temporarily preserve the power of Nether King. That way, you can use Hermes' identity to do whatever you want on Mount Pantheon. That child is the host you've set your eyes on. Hermes looked at old Ha in surprise and even sized him up. After a moment of silence, Hermes suddenly said, Although I don't know why you have the same power as me and are so much weaker, there's one thing I have to tell you. What? Old Ha could not help but frown. He even had a bad premonition in his heart. In fact, since Nero stole the remote control on the beach and then came to this underworld of the past, he had always had this bad premonition, a sense of fear. I actually didn't think so much. Hermes said slowly, but what you said reminded me that I can still do this. What a smart way to do it. This human child can definitely become the perfect host for the power of Hades. Oh my God, this way, I don't have to disguise myself as Hermes to enter Mount Pantheon. I can personally come to Mount Pantheon. Hearing Hermes' words, Old Ha's ears seemed to have been struck by a sudden clap of thunder. He looked at Hermes in front of him in fear and muttered to himself, How? How can this be? This is impossible. This is impossible. You didn't come up with this plan? How can this be me reminding you? No, things shouldn't be like this. Things can't be like this. There must be something wrong. Something is wrong. At this time, Old Ha was like a madman. Sometimes he held his head and muttered to himself, and sometimes he laughed crazily. Suddenly, Old Ha's eyes turned red, and a pure but weak death power erupted from his body. Remote control. I want it back. I want to do it again. Remote control. Old Ha suddenly turned into black smoke and was about to rush out from Hermes' eyes. But how could Hermes let Old Ha do as he wished? Hermes let out a cold harumph. A similar but much stronger energy of death gushed out from Hermes. The two similar energy of death instantly merged, but it was obvious that Hermes' energy of death was stronger. It devoured Old Ha's energy of death in an instant. Hermes waved his hand and pulled Old Ha in front of him. He looked at Old Ha carefully and said, It is indeed the divine power of Hades. Even the divinity is exactly the same. This is strange. Let go of me. Let me go. Old Ha struggled desperately. But Hermes chuckled at this time. Let go of you? No. I suddenly have a better idea. My new son, Pulin, is a good vessel, but compared to him, you seem to be more suitable. Old Ha's body suddenly trembled. He realized that at this moment, everything was in chaos.